across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to the home of common sense. 3 minutes after 1 o'clock. Lots to get through. Keir Starmer, of course, back from Washington. Didn't hang around. You'd at least go for a bit of a tour, wouldn't you? You might think. Starmer is back, upbeat after a better-than-expected meeting with Donald Trump, who's offered a trade deal that could exempt the UK from US tariffs. So how well did Starmer do? I'm going to open the lines on that one straight off the bat. Your responses to how you think our PM performed over there in Washington. Also this afternoon, the BBC issuing a grovelling apology following the airing of that controversial documentary about Gaza, narrated by the son of a terrorist, with the broadcaster admitting to serious flaws. Yeah, that kind of doesn't really touch the sides as to what happened here, journalistically speaking. And the Labour MP Annalise Dodds, the very definition of mediocrity, has resigned as Minister of State for International Development in protest at foreign aid being cut in favour of increasing defence spending. These people do not know how to read the room. She's walked the plank, and thank God for that. More details on the way. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk. Welcome to Friday. It's the beginning of the weekend and lots to get through. Yesterday was watching the big visit to the... It was kind of like a life on Mars moment. Starmer looked like he'd arrived in a new world, but where the kind of air bubble above his head, his coiffured head, as he entered the White House, said, "Where am I? Who is this big orange man shaking my hand like he's about to dislocate it? Who are all these cameras and these people? Yes, Prime Minister, it's the White House. This is the President. He's laid on some sandwiches for you." But first, a weird meeting in the Oval Office, and that's how it works. The two leaders made their way to the most famous office in the land for a pre-lunch, pre-press conference tete-a-tete. These moments are always clunky. I mean, not quite as odd as the Macron moment the day before, when the two leaders appeared to play a brief game of Twister, with each other's limbs. Not quite like that, but before it all kicked off, our man from Blighty had a surprise for Big Don. "I've got something special," said Sir Keir, and he reached into his pocket. Genuinely, for a fleeting moment, I thought he was going to pull out a conker and offer up a sixer for a bit of a game with the comb-over king. Anything can happen in these moments. But no, it was a party invite, as it turns out, from the king. Let's have a listen to that moment.
It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course.
Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. This is a letter from His Majesty the King. It's an invitation for a second state visit. This is really special. This has never happened before. This is unprecedented.
Unprecedented, said Sir Keir, as the two men gathered to congratulate each other on this regal moment. Letter. It's an invite. I'm going to read the invite from the king. It was all a little bit weird, but, I get why they sort of wanted to do it. So Donald Trump, big fan of the royal family, very pleased with that. In many respects, you have to go, well, that's probably a good thing. Right? If you hate Starmer, you'll have hated that moment. If Nigel Farage has done the same thing, you'd go, that's brilliant, that's fantastic what he did there. That's just how we all work and function. None of us are exempt from a bit of confirmation bias. But according to the government, the overall visit, and die-hard Starmer fanboys, I should say, the PM played a blinder, a real statesman who got what he wanted and sealed his status as a big player on the international stage. This is nonsense, by the way. The reality is, and I'd like to think we can kind of all agree on this, the reality is that Starmer didn't do as bad as we thought. It's kind of that simple. And the one thing I would give him is that I don't think it would have looked any different if it had been Rishi Sunak sitting there. I think it would have been equally as, kind of, it's a little bit like, when you go to a sports day, if you've got kids, and there's the kid who's got a bad leg or something, and he's in the running race, and everyone's going, come on, come on, Timmy, you can, come on. You can do it. You can do it. His kid's not got a chance, really. He's not got a cat in hell's chance because he's got a dodgy leg and he can't help it, but he's taking part. He's giving it a go. Come on, Timmy, you can do it. Yeah. Oh, look, he came 27th. But well done, Timmy. It was it would have been the same with Rishi. You know, these guys are not natural players in this context. They just aren't. In fact, I mean, let's be honest, you'd have to be pretty bad to royally mess it up. It's a meeting with another human being. And let's remember, Keir Starmer has been a lawyer all his life. He's not exactly unused to a bit of confrontation, if that is what's needed, or, you know, awkward, difficult moments. But he did. It's just not him. It's not in him to look like the most relaxed man in the world. He's not that. And do you know what? If I was sitting there next to Trump or any other president, I'd probably be a bit like that as well. It's like, it was a bit awkward, not quite sure. Do I sit like this? Do I cross my leg? You look like he wanted to go to the loo half the time. He was so cross-legged, I thought he was in a reef knot at one point. So yes, I think we can all get that. But in terms of how well he did, so Trump is not backwards in coming forwards when it comes to saying what's on his mind. And there were a couple of those moments when they were talking about trade. You know, has he got a trade deal? Oh, he wishes he had, said the president, etc. But he fights the good fight. Did Starmer come away from this okay? Did he do? Yeah, no, sort of. It was, yeah. It's a meeting with two world leaders, right? And that's kind of as good or as bad or whatever. I don't think anything jumped out. I don't think the Labour position that this was some kind of seismic, game-changing moment for the Prime Minister. I seriously, trying to be as objective as I possibly can, clearly not as somebody who would ordinarily be endorsing Keir Starmer to draw the flipping raffle, let alone run the country, then, yeah, I mean, it kind of happened and that was it. Nothing, you know, might be a trade deal, could be a trade deal, might be tariffs, but I hope there won't be any tariffs. Polite disagreement sort of on what they think of Putin. My views are well known, said Sir Keir. And that's kind of all we got, really. There wasn't much challenge at the press conference, I didn't think. I thought that could have been a little longer. That's not Starmer's fault. Trump, I think, calls the shots on that one. Probably had another meeting to do immediately after that. 0344 499 1000. I'm going to ask the question as straight, though, as that. How well did Starmer do? Just give us your objective view on what you thought of that meeting. It is important. The meeting was important, by the way. It was crucial in terms of Ukraine, and we got no assurances on backstops and American defence assistance on that. Neither was it kind of fully ruled out simultaneously. How did he do? How did our man do? He's our Prime Minister, whether you voted for him or not. How would you rate that? Was there something in it that actually you thought was really bad and actually damaging to us in any respect? 0344 499 1000. I think if I had to throw a negative in there, it would be that if Trump thought that the Brits and Starmer were a walkover, then I think he continues to think that. I mean, he made some noise about, you know, he's a great negotiator, this man. He knew what he was doing in that. Your assessment, your analysis, please, on that big powwow between Starmer and Trump in the White House yesterday. 0344 499 1000. I'll come back later in the hour to a point on trade as well, because I thought there were some interesting comments and a couple of names were referenced by Trump, which I think are that they form a great comparison as to where the United States is in comparison to where the United Kingdom is. 0344 499 1000. Let's get a word on this and the other big stories of the day. Harrison Allman-Varty, a Reform UK councillor, is with us. Harrison, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Nice to have you with us. So I don't know if you watched with your popcorn on your lap as this all unravelled yesterday. We waited ages for that press conference, didn't we? But they had the bit outside where you do the meet and greet, and then you go inside and you sit in those nice sort of yellowy, goldy chairs, and you do a bit there, which is where the letter came out, and then you go for some vol-au-vents and an iced fancy, and then you have the press conference. And apparently it's the vol-au-vent bit where they do all the business. It's only a couple of hours. What was your takeaway from it?
I think I was quite relieved to see that the whole body language was calmed down since Macron left the building. Anybody watching that would have thought it was all a bit weird with how they, touch each other's legs and arms, and it was all just a bit uncomfortable. Do you know what? Credit where credit's due. I think Starmer did a pretty good job. And I think on these types of issues, I think people do have to say, politics aside, regardless of your political beliefs, he is our ambassador, and he's gone over there to kind of wave the flag of Britain. And I don't think anything out of that meeting, really, from what I saw, was anything that had my head in my hands in that sense. So, look, I think it's within everybody's interest that's Starmer has a good relationship with Trump. I think he played all his cards right with using a second state visit. I think it's very wise. So, credit where credit's due. He did a good job yesterday.
And I sense as well, Harrison, that most politicians, maybe particularly British politicians, I don't know, it's all we really know intimately, would always feel a little bit clunky, a bit awkward when, not just because you're meeting, these guys will meet at different functions throughout the course of their time in office anyway, G7s, G20s and various other meetings, often meetings you're not even aware are taking place. But when it's a meeting like that and the world's press are there and it's the White House and it's big and there's pressure on you, I kind of defy anyone not to feel a little bit self-conscious in those moments.
100%. I think, I actually think Trump made it as easy as he could for Starmer. I got the impression that Starmer really could have said anything and Trump would have slapped him on the back and said, yeah, absolutely. I personally think, in my opinion, I think the way that this is going to operate is Trump is going to be a Mr. Nicey Nice, to have a good relationship with Keir Starmer and a good relationship with the King. I think that matters. But I think J.D. Vance is always going to be the bad cop in the good cop, bad cop situation. We kind of touched a little bit on that yesterday where they spoke about freedom of speech. J.D. Vance was right to bring that up. And almost he was the one being contentious. It was the same in, obviously, that freedom of speech when J.D. Vance was doing that speech in Europe. So I think it might be a case of good cop, bad cop. It's very rare that we have vice presidents that engage as much as he has so far.
Oh, no vice president has ever been this high profile, right?
Yeah. I think I personally think he seems very intelligent. I think it could be a case of good cop, bad cop. But like I said, I think Trump made it as easy as he could. Look, Trump's not an idiot. He knows politically that they are on different pages, and he knows there's a lot of stuff going on in Britain that he wouldn't agree with, such as net zero things. However, it's not really a place where they would talk about their differences or their politics. It's a case of talking about things they have in common, which was nice. They were saying about things that they both love their country. So I think, look, there wasn't anything in there that could have really that went bad, and I think Trump made it as easy as he could, which was nice.
Yeah. Well, let's have a listen then to Mr. Starmer. Here's what he had to say about that special relationship. In fact, we'll come back to that in just a couple of moments, Harrison, and hear what he had to say. Let's move on then to this story. BBC apologising over Gaza. They've apologised and admitted to serious flaws in that production. You're aware of that production, of course, and I think everybody is now. What's made it interesting is the day after 500 goodies over there at Lineker Towers signed a letter saying it's outrageous that they've done this, the BBC came out with an absolutely stonking apology.
Oh, it was so embarrassing. It's almost a case of how many times can the BBC apologise? I remember that the article in the Times, and it said that the fallout from the film has sent the BBC News and Current Affairs division into, quote, meltdown, according to insiders. And I think, and then when looking further, it says that they'll be conducting their own internal review. What? Internal review? It's like, that's not really going to satisfy anybody. It's just, once again, they're marking their own homework. Yeah. And I think it's another nail in the BBC's coffin, in all honesty. I think their whole platform is on borrowed time anyway. The whole thing of you have to pay for it, it's essentially a tax, will expire at some point. I mean, they've probably bought a few years because they've got a Labour government in that are likely to back them. But honestly, I question the kind of how long the BBC will actually be in existence, and this certainly will not help its case. And I think it's worth pointing the question is how many times can the BBC apologise until people just go, I've had enough?
Yeah. And this one, let's not go over all the terrain of why this one was the mother of all blunders, editorially, journalistically, almost in the unforgivable territory in terms of what was done here. I know it was an independent production. In many respects, that kind of makes it worse, because if you are an independent production,
it's irrelevant.
The BBC still have a duty to check your work, to ensure that it reaches and fulfills and adheres to all the standards of the BBC. So on something, a documentary on, for goodness sake, it's not as if prior to this, the BBC hadn't already been under the spotlight for accusations of bias around this very story. And a production company comes in and says, I've got this documentary, we've made it, it's fronted by a little kid, a little Palestinian kid who's talking about, how terrible life is. If ever there was a red flag to double, triple, quadruple check something editorially and from every single angle, it was this. And they failed. I don't know whether anyone will walk the plank on this, though.
I doubt it. I think it's, to be honest, I think it's irrelevant on who made it, whether it was the BBC themselves or they have that duty to check that, especially on something as sensitive as Israel and Gaza. And I think the most important factor for a news organization is credibility. People need to watch it and think, I know that they are feeding me the most balance of information so I can form my opinion, right? If they wanted someone's opinion, they'd turn on LBC or whatever it might be. So I think I personally think, like I said, the BBC's on borrowed time anyway, but this is shameful. And I think rightfully so they should apologise. And I personally don't think an internal investigation is enough. I think the government really should have their own sort of review into it, or something externally anyway, because you get the sense that once again the BBC is marking its own homework.
There it is. Harrison, stay with us. Lots to get through. Harrison Allman-Varty, Reform UK councillor, is with us. One of the youngest councillors in the land, don't you know? Back with more from Harrison in a couple of moments. Over to you as well. We're asking what may be the most obvious question in the world. How well did Starmer do? Why would we not? Big visit, big trip, full of significance. How well did our man, whether you voted for him or not, our Prime Minister, how did he fare over there in the Oval Office? Lines are open, 1:20. This is Talk.
they have looked at us. They do know we have problems. The shine has come off, and actually a bit like a sort of big cousin who's a bit more successful, who worries about the sort of, you know, wider family at large and wants them to be okay, who sort of has a pastoral patriarchal role to play in the greater family. That's what America's doing now, is looking over to Europe, it's looking over to the UK and saying, look, you're one of us. We're kind of all part of the same civilizational development that's been facing a crisis. Get your act together.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
23 minutes after 1 o'clock, Mark Francois, the Shadow Defence Minister, will join us in around about 10 minutes to talk about the Starmer visit. Also, Andy Williams, political commentator, on as well. Two, I think, differing views on how the Prime Minister did over there in Washington. Right now, Harrison Allman-Varty is with us. He is, of course, Reform UK councillor. Let's move to this story, Harrison. A new deal has been reached between GPs and doctors, which is hoped will end the early morning rush for appointments. This is for England. The agreement includes an extra £889 million in funding. Whether that's new money, you often have to dig deeper to find out where this has come from. Health Secretary Wes Streeting has hailed this as a breakthrough moment.
I like it. I think it sounds good.
Oh, we're expecting a clip there, but we didn't get one. Don't worry. Anyway, he's hailed it as a breakthrough moment. Is it a breakthrough moment, though? There's the question.
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I think it's good. I mean, I think most people would like this. The problem is it real? I think everybody's been promised the world when it comes to the NHS, whether it's the Conservatives or Labour. So I think, look, don't get me wrong, this is a good idea. The problem with that we have with the NHS is lots of people think they can't get an appointment, so they go to A&E and then they clog the system up that way. So by attacking it from the front, by dealing with people so they can get appointments, this will have a great effect. So I have no doubt, and I wish the Health Secretary well on his mission. However, I just think people are rightfully so reserved when it comes to something like this, because we have had our hopes up so many times when it comes to the National Health Service. We've been promised so many things, and we often give it so much money. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results.
Yeah.
So I think we do need to have a bit of a different view on the NHS, and I think Wes has kind of got that kind of radical lens on. I wish him well with it, but I hate to be kind of pessimistic. Unfortunately, I think most people will be in the fact that we get promised so much and we very rarely see good results.
There are already some practices that do implement this online thing. The one round our way doesn't, and it is an 8 a.m. scramble. I've lost count of how many times, especially with young kids, I've seen my other half on the phone trying to, you are currently number 67 in the queue, and then you go and make some toast while you've got it on speaker, and you have a cup of tea, and then it says you're now 62 in the queue, and then eventually you get to the end and they tell you there's no appointments left. So it's not straightforward at the moment. Will this streamline it? We hope so. We know IT can go desperately wrong, but booking online should be the quickest way. I guess there are some people who will struggle with it, though. That might be the issue.
Yeah, I mean, look, IT and AI provide a massive opportunity for the NHS. It can, identify spots that have now become available through people cancelling. I quite like Rishi Sunak's idea of, if you cannot make an appointment, you pay a £5 or £10 payment. It's not enough to cripple someone, but it's enough to, in the sense that it would make them feel that they have to go to that appointment, or they don't have to go, kind of thing. So look, I think he's good to bring on different ideas. And I do wish him well with it. However, obviously people are going to be sceptical about it, but I do wish him well with it. And I think, look, the technology and AI does provide a cracking opportunity.
Well,
really.
let's hope it does, because that's all we can hope for. Another NHS story, though, a disturbing one. The NHS is launching a £10.7 million trial offering puberty blockers to children seeking gender treatment with parental and doctor consent. These, of course, are the things that pause puberty's physical changes. They were banned in the UK last year over safeguarding and long-term effects. This trial, led by King's College London, aims to monitor the effects of kids for 2 years, including brain scans and well-being assessments. Some doctors and campaigners argue that the trial is unethical, citing known risks like harm to bone and brain developments and concerns over long-term effects on fertility. Quite why anybody in the medical world would see, I mean, bearing on the key word here is children. These are children. We are going to mutilate the natural processes of the body with medicine, because you might at some point be confused about whether you're a boy or a girl. I find this extraordinary, but that is the direction of travel, it seems.
Like you just said, the reason why the Health Secretary in the Conservative government and the Health Secretary in this government pushed back is because the data was that it wasn't safe for children, right? Yeah. So people should feel incredibly uncomfortable by the fact that we are doing a trial on children. I mean, when has that ever ethically become comfortable? I think some people have maybe been within this world for so long that they're just comfortably numb to the sense that but people need to step back and think, what are we actually talking about here? We're talking about disrupting natural processes of a human. Now, we don't trust anyone under the age of 18 to enroll in the army. We don't trust anyone under the age of 18 to vote in England. We don't trust anybody under the age of 18 to drink. You know, so why on earth are we saying that? But it is okay to be on puberty blockers. It's beyond me. Don't get me wrong. If you're 21 years old and you know and you want to make a decision, then there's nothing really that you can stop you in that sense. But I think there is a duty of care on parents and hospitals and the government to look after children, very impressionable children. And I think if we're not doing that, then we are failing as a society. I think it's deeply uncomfortable. I think the average person should feel uncomfortable with something like this. It's a confusing time for children, and I think it almost feels like you're preying on children who are vulnerable and confused. It doesn't sit right with me, and I don't think it'll sit right with many of your viewers.
Yeah, I think you're right. Harrison, on that note, we finish, but have a cracking weekend. We will speak again soon. He's Harrison Allman-Varty. He is the Reform UK Councillor, the youngest Reform UK councillor in the land. One of the youngest of any party in the... He was a Tory, by the way, 10 minutes ago. Then he crossed the line. Thank you to him. More comment on this in a few moments. Barry says Starmer didn't do a good job. He was obviously overwhelmed, embarrassed and really wet. As far as I could see, the only person that came out with any credit was Vance. Roll on his presidency, says Barry. Barry, thank you for that. I found Starmer cringe-making, says Hev. Talk about milking it with a letter from the King. Let's wait and see what the results are. I Kennedy the other day say he will be... I Kennedy? Is that a typo, I think? Will be advising Trump not to allow the Chagos go. I hope we either keep it or give it to the Americans, says Hev. We'll have more comment from you in a few moments' time. 0344 499 1000. We'll chat to Mark Francois, Shadow Defence Minister, in just a moment. On that trip, about that trip of Starmer in the White House, we're asking you that question. How well do you think the British Prime Minister did over there with Donald Trump? Thoughts on that? Lines are open. It's 1:30. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And welcome back. 25 to 2 on Talk. In a moment, we'll speak to Andy Williams, the political commentator, on that Starmer visit. Let's first get a word from Mark Francois, joins us in the studio, Shadow Defence Minister. Good to see you, Mark, by the way. Thank you for coming in. Before we get to Starmer and how that all went over there on Capitol Hill, in your role, Shadow Defence Minister, you've obviously got a lot on your table over the whole issue surrounding what is going on with Ukraine. I notice you're wearing the UK-Ukraine lapel badge there as well,
and I have been for 3 years.
And I was about to say, you're not. This is not the fashion thing that some people have adopted.
I didn't put it on just for this morning.
You've been talking about this forever, way before many of your colleagues have. Firstly, what did you make of the recent decision in terms of defence? Starmer's lobbed it up a bit, arguably not enough. Will it ever be enough? At the expense of the international development budget. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we've been pressing the government for months to increase spending. Before the election, we'd wanted to go to 2.5%. That was in our manifesto. So we welcome the increase in defence spending, in principle. But part of the problem here, I think, is that a lot of that money is coming from the overseas aid budget. Yeah. It then goes to the MOD, but it looks as if a lot of that will then be given to Mauritius because of this bonkers deal on the Chagos Islands. So if that goes ahead, we still hope it doesn't. In effect, what you've done is you've taken a lot of money out of the overseas aid budget and given it to Mauritius in order to rent back a base and some islands that already belong to us in the first place. Now, the technical word for that is bonkers, or in actual fact, the Times newspaper based in this building described the deal as insane. So I think many Labour backbench MPs, as well as Tories, be very annoyed if it turns out, which it looks like it might, that they've taken money out of the aid budget to give it to the Mauritian government.
That's called a cluster something, isn't it? But we can't say that on air.
Well, I certainly can't.
Or in the House of Commons, for that matter. It is a bit of a mess. And, of course, on that visit to the White House, Trump, which we thought he might be quite angry about the Chagos thing, but he seemed quite relaxed about it.
As the saying has it, he didn't say yes and he didn't say no. Yeah. If you look at exactly what he said, well, we need to talk about this, well, we need more detail. Yeah. And the government have been trying to spin that, he's approved it. Well, I'm not quite sure that's what he did. Sometimes President Trump can be a little enigmatic, and I think the United States administration want much more detail on what this actually involves. That is how I read it.
I think that's probably true. And it's interesting, just a nice bit of serendipity. Annalise Dodds has just legged it from the International Development Office because she wasn't happy about that change in budget. But she was kind of thrown into the bear pit in the week over Chagos as well.
Yes, we had an opposition day debate in the Commons on Wednesday evening. This is where the opposition, we get to choose the topic. And we thought now was the right time to debate Chagos. She's not the minister who's been dealing with this. It's either been the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, but he was in the States, or his junior minister, Stephen Doughty. Now, I don't know where Stephen was, but for her, it was a bit of a hospital pass, because there were two questions she was asked remorselessly that she couldn't answer. The first was, how much is this going to cost? She was asked that again and again, and she wasn't allowed to answer, because the government just won't say. They've been stalling Parliament for 4 months on this. And, this is UK taxpayers' money. Yep. We're elected as MPs to hold the government of the day to account. The public have a right to know. And if we're about to sign up for a multi-billion-pound deal to rent back something that belongs to us in the first place, the least thing the government can do is tell Parliament how much. And the second question she couldn't answer is, what departmental budget does this come out of? Now, I'm not saying that because of the fact they gave her that hospital pass debate, she's resigned. I've read her resignation letter. It's very polite. She implies in the letter she was already going to resign, but she waited because the PM was out in Washington. She didn't want to do that to a British Prime Minister going to meet an American president. And if that was her thinking, that is perfectly honourable. Yeah. Okay? But either way, she's clearly very, very upset about the cut to overseas aid, And it's even more upsetting if the reason they've cut it is just to give the money to Mauritius.
Yeah, because the maths don't seem to stack up on this, as you rightly say.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Prime Minister over there then in Washington. I mean, I would say, I said at the beginning, Mark, you probably wouldn't have heard the very start, but in fairness to Starmer, I think anyone that is put in that kind of almost the bear pit of the Oval Office with a very sort of alpha male, testosterone-driven big guy like Donald Trump, a very overpowering figure, I'd imagine that's quite a tricky moment. I mean, it tests your self-confidence to its very fibre to do that. So it's never going to be easy. You're never going to look relaxed, are you?
Well, I've never had the pleasure, as they say. I mean, I once was allowed to poke my head round the door of the Oval Office on a trip to the White House.
I did that as well.
Yeah, they let me sort of peer around that. Right, so my nose has been in the Oval Office, but that's about it.
Yeah.
No, it's a tough gig. And, there wasn't a Love Actually moment either way.
No.
And, His Majesty the King's invitation to the President, and a second state visit, which is pretty unprecedented, that seemed to go down very well. That was a good icebreaker. They seemed to get on all right. But what was really important was, other than the stage stuff for the cameras, as we all know, it's when the cameras leave and then they talk turkey afterwards.
Yeah.
And we had another debate in the Commons, we've been busy this week, on Thursday, all about Ukraine. And there was absolute cross-party support in the Commons on two propositions. One, there can be no negotiations about Ukraine without Ukraine. And we cannot support any deal that looks like we've settled on Putin's terms. The House was completely unanimous about that. And I noticed that when President Trump was challenged about the fact he'd called Zelensky a dictator, he sort of affected, oh, did I? So hopefully he's going to be meeting Zelensky fairly shortly. So perhaps Trump has rode back a little bit from his position there.
When they started to talk about trade, there was a moment where it was a kind of, I don't know whether it was a passive-aggressive moment, the backhanded comment, whatever you want to call it, when Trump came out with this line about, he's a good negotiator, I don't know what they're paying him over there, but, he's earning his money. Was that for the cameras? I guess we'll never know. But Trump suggested that maybe there won't be tariffs over here because we can do a good trade deal. Do you believe it?
I'm told that, when Trump was in his first incarnation, when he was the 45th president, I had a conversation with Woody Johnson, who was then the American ambassador, and he said to me, Trump wants a trade deal with Britain one day.
Yeah.
And that was over 4 years ago. Because we've left the European Union, we could do that. Because we're not in the customs union, you can now do unilateral trade deals with other countries. If we were still in the EU and in the customs union, you can only do a trade deal via the European Union. So this gives us a marvellous opportunity, now that we have that freedom of action because we've left the EU, to do a bilateral deal with the United States, and I think we should take full advantage of that. They're the biggest investor in the UK. We're the biggest investor in the US. So we're trading with them every day, but if we can have a bilateral deal that means we can trade without tariffs, that would be to their advantage and to our advantage. So if the Prime Minister's made any progress there, it remains to be seen. But ironically, as he's an arch Remainer, he remains a Remainer, there'd be a delightful irony if, because we've left the EU, we're able to do a trade deal with the US.
I thought what jumped out to me as well, Mark, when he was talking, he talked about his Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, his Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. These guys are skilled operators, top of their tree business people. They know their way around everything. And I was looking at our administration, where you can't find any business experience. So he's got the squillionaires Howard and Scott on the case, and we've got David Lammy and Angela Rayner. I mean, they're set up, aren't they, in the States? I mean, it's already a richer place than here. I think Mississippi, the poorest state in America, is richer than people in the United. People there are richer than people in the United Kingdom, and he's got those that know business.
Well, there's no one in the current British cabinet that's ever run a business.
Yeah.
The business secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, he's had a little local difficulty of his own lately.
The solicitor.
Well, there we are. I know some solicitors, by the way, who feel very, very strongly about that. I mean,
Absolutely.
really, really strongly. So anyway, there's no one in the cabinet who's ever run a business. The Americans have a different system to ours. Very many members of their cabinet come from a business background. Trump has a business background, as the whole world knows. So, but nonetheless, I mean, I think we do have enough experts we could draw on to strike a good deal. You know, if they can't find anyone else, go and ask David Frost. He did a pretty good deal when he was working for Boris Johnson. So we have got people in this country that know how to negotiate.
There it is. Listen, Mark, good to see you. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me on.
Shadow Defence Minister Mark Francois with us here on the programme. It's 1:45. Let's get another word on how Trump did or didn't do with Andy Williams, political commentator. Andy, good afternoon to you.
Afternoon, Ian. Hi.
Nice to have you with us. So give us your overview, your assessment, if you like, of what you thought about that first visit to the White House.
I mean, I think Keir Starmer's team will be absolutely delighted with that. You know, it could barely have gone any better. I know there was that skirmish at the start with J.D. Vance talking about freedom of speech, but by and large, he went over there, he got slapped on the back, there's a potential trade deal on the table. I think it actually went really well. And one thing I would say is that, you know, Keir Starmer throughout his political career has been consistently underestimated. When he was leader of the Labour Party, he became Prime Minister. I think he's a much better Prime Minister than people are giving him credit for, and he's shown it on the world stage.
You'd have to be really bad, though, to flunk it fully, wouldn't you? I mean, I get that if you're in a meeting like that, particularly with... I don't think it happens when he's met Macron or some of the others, but when it's the President of the United States and that President happens to be Donald Trump, who's a big figure, he's an imposing figure, you really don't know what he's going to say, so you've got to be on your guard. I mean, I get all of that, but you know, he's a lawyer. Starmer's a lawyer. You know, he's not unused to speaking or reacting quickly to something. It's not that hard, is it, to not flunk it, as it were?
I don't know. I think it's harder than you think, not least because privately he has nothing in common with Donald Trump. You know, they don't believe the same things. They believe completely opposite, completely different things. So it's actually, I think, quite a feat of, and I mean, he has to do it, but it's a feat of self-restraint, firstly. And because he is so unpredictable, that is difficult to navigate. The flip side is some people would say that the easiest person to negotiate with is a narcissist, because the way that you deal with them is praise them, lavish praise on them. And that's exactly what he did. But no, I don't think it was an easy assignment. And actually, if you think back to when Theresa May was Prime Minister, she had a disastrous meeting at the White House with Donald Trump, and this went much, much better.
Do you think he came away with anything? I mean, I know these meetings, and certainly the press conference element of these meetings, are quite generic. I mean, there's no one's going to sort of hold up a contract and go, look, this is what we've just signed. So it's about mood music. It's about potential for the future. There's nothing we can solidly say has changed, is there?
There's not, but I think what it's done is laid the foundations for a relationship that can work and can work for Britain. And that is the most important thing. And not only that, you know, Starmer has now positioned himself as somebody who can be the conduit, the bridge, if you like, between Europe. And let's not forget that the new German Chancellor is not a fan of Donald Trump. Macron, although they had a decent meeting this week, is not a fan of Donald Trump. And I think Starmer, actually, because he, you know, is the British Prime Minister and Trump has a sort of intrinsic respect for the United Kingdom. And by the way, I thought that the sort of stunt with the King's letter was a masterstroke, really. You know, you've got to use all of the weapons in your armory, and the monarchy is one of them. So I think he did a really, really good job. Did he come away with anything tangible? No. But as you sort of alluded to, I don't think that was the purpose of yesterday. The purpose was to lay the foundations for a solid relationship going forward.
Do you think Donald Trump took him seriously?
I think he did. I mean, the truth is, none of us really know what he's thinking, and I think sometimes he's not even sure what he's thinking. But yes, I do. I think he sees a man who he respects. I think he sees a man who will be honest and direct with him, but in a polite way. And I think if you think back to some of the less serious, less credible, less capable prime ministers we've had in the last 10 years, actually, Keir Starmer is a much more serious and effective performer.
On that point, great to have you with us, Andy. Thank you. Andy Williams, political commentator on that trip to the States. He thought it was a good 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 maybe for the Prime Minister, Mark Francois. A little less than that, I sense, but he is opposition, fair enough. 0344 499 1000. Over to you in a couple of moments. Our lines are open. This is Talk.
How much of BBC licence fee payers' money ended up in the pockets of an illegal terrorist group, as in Hamas? Because that is a serious scandal, all right?
Yeah, and look, it happened in the U.S. with Doge and Elon Musk uncovering all this money that was going to terrorist organizations or organizations that supported terrorism. And it's completely obscene that it's taxpayer money or in this case, license payer money that's going to this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just to come back to that point that Trump made about his commerce secretary when they were talking about trade, and Starmer and Trump talking about trade, and he mentioned Howard Lutnick and Scott Bessent. These two, these are squillionaires, these guys. So I know to some people that is a problem in politics. You know, you're that rich. Well, you don't tend to need to take a bribe if you're that rich as well. Lutnick, businessman of decades, huge wealth. Scott Bessent, this will upset some people, business partner of George Soros. Between them, they pretty much own half the world. But the two guys are so experienced in wealth creation. They're so experienced in business. And when Trump said that, he said, I've got, the Commerce Secretary, Scott and Howard, I think he referenced them as in that press conference. I thought, who would Starmer point to with similar experience? I know these guys are exceptionally rich and successful, but even something more moderate, who would he point to and say, you've got Scott and Howard, Mr. President, and we've got Angela and Rachel on the case, or David and the others whose names escape me right now, none of whom have any business Jonathan. We got Jonathan and Rachel who are going to set the world on fire with their amazing trade-based brains. Good Lord. Andrew is in Hertfordshire. What do you make of it, Andrew? What are your thoughts on Starmer's first day at the Oval Office?
Yeah, credit where credit's due. He was a grovelling, little, wretched North London human rights lawyer. He went through the door with nothing. He had absolutely nothing. And then from a party that hates Great Britain and hates the royal family, the only thing he had was that letter from the king. And then grovellingly, he had to give it across because that's all he had. Trump has worked him like a treat. And today, the Labour Party has done what it always does. He had a window of something positive, and Annalisa Dodds, because he's got a woman problem, has resigned. It's actually, we're watching a comedy play out, and he is an amateur. Lammy finally found a pair of shoes. The only person that he could take into the room is that wonderful lady that runs Bet365, probably the highest taxpayer in the country. Now, she would be a really good person to take. She's English. She runs a great British business.
She's worth as much as those two guys I just mentioned, I think, as well. She's right up there. What was it I mean, would any Prime Minister have done any different, though, Andrew? I mean, bearing in mind you're not there to make a solid announcement on something, but really just to set the mood music on your relationship. What did Starmer flunk in that respect?
You go there with a draft trade agreement, and you take it, you drive the agenda. Remember, Starmer called the meeting, and when he called the meeting, you got to go there and you got to add value. All he had was the letter. So if you were a Prime Minister, you'd rock through the door and say, you saw the bloke from Poland on Monday, he's at 4.7, we're going to be at 8 by the end of the year. Yeah. And that's where we're going to be. In relation to trade, there's the draft trade agreement. That's what we want. All right.
But could the Prime Minister have really said, here's the trade agreement without having spoken to those guys? I mean, trade agreements have to be done almost department by department. They can take years to hammer out.
Yeah, well, he's got the two most Machiavellian, truly evil people on God's good earth working for him. He's got Mandelson, pure evil, and then he's got Jonathan Powell, the man that gave the IRA the comfort letters, who hates Great Britain more than anybody.
Jonathan Powell would say he's a patriot.
Of course he would.
And he speaks well of you, Andrew, as well, apparently.
No, you could not get a more wretched individual. He gave the IRA an amnesty for killing people in Britain, in Manchester, in London.
Well, would the weight of that responsibility have been down to Jonathan Powell? But anyway, I take your point. We are talking about a different era there, though. Listen, Andrew, thank you, and that doesn't defend or prosecute any particular position. That's Andrew in Hertfordshire. Mike's in Warwickshire. How did Starmer do, Mike? What are your thoughts? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Well, I mean, basically, he's gone over there. And he's taken this letter with him, and the whole point behind that was to butter up Trump, who they know is a big royalist. Is from people who don't like the royals, the Labour Party, right? And as soon as he got on Trump's good side, Trump's saying all nice things to him, but how much is he going to follow through with? He said some stuff. We've heard him say stuff before, but what does he actually follow it up with, Trump? And what they don't realise is this guy's used to doing deals. He's used to doing high finance deals, etc. As your previous caller said, he's got people around him who are used to operating on a global basis. Yeah. And we've got two people who, well, haven't had any experience. And look at just one simple fact, right? Trump is sorting out the problem with an overweight public sector. He's dealing with that. We are adding to it and rewarding it. Yeah. So,
and it's in the trouble is it's in Starmer's DNA, isn't it? To not just... He wouldn't hide from the fact that he believes in a bigger public sector. He believes in the whole, DEI stuff. That kind of appeals to him, and his front bench as well. They think all of this stuff is OK. So he couldn't be in a more different position than Trump.
Well, they think it's real, but at the end of the day, everything's got to be paid for. I'm a realist, right? No matter what it is, you've got to create the wealth in the first instance.
Yeah.
If you don't create the wealth, you can't have the other bits that go with it.
True.
And basically, the system that we're trying to set up in this country is a failed system because communism failed. Look at what China are doing now.
Yeah.
They're calling it something else, calling it a jam sandwich, but it's basically what America are doing as well. But there's just a slightly different design on who's going to have the money.
Indeed, yes, absolutely right. I mean, America are playing the same game, exactly the same game. There's very much a Chinese veneer to what is going on, and it's unapologetic from the White House. Listen, Mike, we hit the clock, but thank you very much indeed for that one here. Hannah in Stafford. Starmer did well because Trump let him. Anyone is deluded if they think he's a match for Trump. He's not. You can guarantee as part of any deal, Starmer would have said, make me sound good. Trump is now Starmer's new boss, and thank goodness he is, says Hannah in Stafford. Lots to come in the next section. Chloe Dobbs joins us to digest the big stories of the day. Lots to wade through. Our lines are open. 0344 499 1000 is where you'll find us. Right now, the time is 2 o'clock. Let's get the latest news headlines.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Certainly is, 3 minutes after 2 o'clock. Welcome to the weekend. It's nearly the weekend, right? I think we can shoehorn today into part of the weekend. Up and running at this end, loads to talk about. Keir Starmer, of course, is now back from Washington. He's a bit upbeat after that better-than-expected meeting with Donald Trump, who's offered a trade deal that could exempt the UK from tariffs. Well, watch this space on that one. Could take a long time before you see a manifestation of that. How well did Starmer do in this meeting? Well, several little meetings, the stuff we didn't see, the Oval Office moment with the envelope and the invite, and then, of course, the press conference afterwards. Your response. Labour MP Annalise Dodds has resigned as Minister of State for International Development in protest against that cut to foreign aid in favour of increasing defence spending. She wasn't happy. She's chosen to walk the plank. How will the government cope without her? Details to come. And politicians who block net zero plans will hike energy bills and hurt their constituents, Britain's climate chief has warned. Is that strictly true? Will it really do that? That seems to be the views of one set of pressure group voices. Your thoughts and responses on that as well. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. Some comments coming in. Sue says, what has happened to the CAS report? Yeah, this was, of course, after the announcement that the government, the NHS, are going to spend 10 million quid on piloting a new puberty blocker scheme so that you can attack the natural development of young kids. They are children, by the way, so you're able to hack away at the natural process because a child has said, I'm not sure I'm a boy or a girl, etc. The CAS report, of course, warned against this. I thought our children were going to be safe after that. I really fear for the future of our country and children under this evil, incompetent, ideological government. It makes you wonder whether the CAS report, which I think was it commissioned before? It's hard to keep up with the reports and inquiries, but nonetheless, it did say hold fire. I think their answer to this is they did hold fire, and now they've got something that might be more carefully considered. I think if you're butchering children's bodies, I don't know how carefully considered that could be. This one comes in from Clayton, who says, do you think that Trump thought that Lammy, Starmer and Mandelson were a tribute act to the Three Stooges? Yes, I think they probably were. Chris in Norwich says, we listened and cringed again as Starmer said undermined instead of underpinned. Did anyone else spot that in biased speech? JD Vance knows all about Starmer via Elon Musk. He's fooling no one except Trump. Or is he? Well, I guess if you're the President of the United States, you're going to be meeting with people who have all sorts of shades of different political allegiances. There is that. They need to do trade with us. We need to do trade with them. America needs trade too. They might be big. They might be quite rich. I mean, they're getting richer over there in the States, have done for the last year or so. And it's their economy is looking really good and is set to grow. He's got his best men. And when I say men, stroke women, I use that as a generic term, have to qualify that for the Ofcom fans. He's got his best men in those jobs. Let's get a word on this. Chloe Dodds, political commentator, is with us. How are you doing, Chloe?
Good, thank you. How are you, Ian?
Good as gold at this end. Nice to have you with us again, as ever. I mean, just give us your assessment then on Donald Trump. In fact, before we do, let's hear from Keir Starmer. This is him, bearing in mind of all the things they talked about. But here's Starmer and what he had to say about their relationship. Have a listen.
Very good. Personal. We get on very well. We've met a number of times. We get on very well. And
you see President 45 different than President 47?
All presidents are different. They're all different. Like all prime ministers are different. But, as I said, I think at the press conference, we come from different political traditions, but the President and I have got a lot in common. We get on well. I think we understand one another.
There he is. That's, I'm about to say Donald Trump. It's Keir Starmer speaking to Fox News, Chloe. What was your assessment of what happened there yesterday? Firstly in the Oval Office and then that press conference.
Well, I think number 10 will definitely be seeing this as a success because it seems on the face of it like Starmer has successfully managed to woo Donald Trump. But those of us here in the UK that know the real Keir Starmer can clearly see that this is all a show and it's all fake. We just looked at that clip there of him saying how well he gets on with Donald Trump as if they're bestie mates. But I mean, let's go back to the old clips where Keir Starmer is saying that this man is dangerous. I wouldn't have him round my house for dinner. David Lammy, of course, sitting on Keir Starmer's front benches and getting in meetings with Donald Trump as well, pretending like they're best friends, when David Lammy said that he shouldn't even be allowed to step foot in the UK because he's such a dangerous man. So a lot of it seemed a little bit cringe to me. Also, Keir Starmer, who's clearly quite a socially awkward guy, going to put his hand on Donald Trump's shoulder, because I'm sure he was prepped by his team and told, oh, it worked for Macron, so you should do it. And it just looked very awkward. And then giving the letter from the king to say, oh, come over to the UK, you can have an extra special state visit, clearly trying to woo him. And it looks like it worked, but those of us in the UK can see it's all a bit of a show. One thing I was really glad to see was that JD Vance very forthrightly pointed out the free speech problem that we have in the UK and said that they were going to discuss that. Keir Starmer tried to shut it down and said, oh, we have always had free speech in the UK and I'm really proud of that. And I don't know if he managed to convince them in whatever private talks they had behind doors, but he wasn't fooling me, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I did say at the beginning, Chloe, that, you know, in fairness to, well, sort of in fairness to Starmer, had Rishi Sunak been sitting there, I think it would have looked pretty similar, to be honest. I think we would have seen that kind of slightly awkward. You know, these guys are not natural in that environment. You know, to be a politician today, I think you have to tick a lot more boxes than perhaps you used to, because of the 24-hour nature of media. You do have to look the part, you have to walk the part, you've got to be able to walk and look and chew gum all at the same time. You've got to do all of those things. And I just think with Starmer, this doesn't disqualify anyone from still being a politician or even a prime minister, but it doesn't help. And I just think he's not cut from that kind of cloth, is he?
No, I mean, there's not a single ounce of charisma in Keir Starmer's body, if you ask me. He speaks very awkwardly. I mean, here Trump actually gave him a compliment on his accent, but I think that was just Trump being very charming. And on that point, where we see them getting along well here, this may be Trump also putting on a show, being the charming man that he is. I'd be very interested to see, after Keir Starmer left, what they were saying behind closed doors. Were they saying, oh gosh, what an idiot? Or did they actually... Were they impressed by what he said? Were they impressed by Keir Starmer's lies, where he said that we have free speech in the UK, or did they think it was all a load of nonsense? But looks like we may be on track for a good trade deal with the US. Let's see what happens. Also, still a lot of question marks around Ukraine. We've got provisional thumbs up for the Chagos deal, which I was disappointed about because I really wanted the Trump administration to push Keir Starmer to ditch that. But there we go.
It's interesting. I was watching it was about a year ago, a documentary on the Thatcher and Reagan years. I don't know if you caught that, but it was it was extraordinary. And you know, I was a kid when this was going on. You weren't around, Chloe, when this was going on, but what I hadn't realised is quite how powerful the UK was during that time. This is just post the wall coming down, and you know, the USSR breaking up and all that then happened, and Gorbachev and the changing face. But the point of mentioning that, not just that, you know, the UK was in, you know, very fine, very influential form, even just in this is the 1980s, for goodness sake, not the 1880s. It was still punching well above its weight, you could say. But the meetings between Thatcher and Reagan look so relaxed. I mean, they look like equals. They look like they were absolutely on the same page. These were heady days. I mean, in a way, I don't want you to watch it, because you'll probably cry at the end of it and go, please, can our country be a bit more like that? Even, you know, Blair and Bush. I know Blair sometimes looked a little bit clunky when he was wearing one of those kind of Air Force jackets or whatever it was he had to wear at a press conference next to George Bush. But there was a sense of synergy, and well, I mean, Reagan and Thatcher, they absolutely adored each other. They were much more on the same page politically. Thatcher was often looking to Reagan for inspiration for her own policies. On the other hand, Trump and Starmer are just like completely diametrically opposed. I think that Keir Starmer just looks like a little weakling compared to Trump. I mean, I'm glad that we've at least got one good leader in the West to stand up for us, Donald Trump. If it was Kamala Harris and Keir Starmer, God help us. Oh, man alive. Can you imagine watching that? I mean, it would have just been a horrendous... I don't know if I'd have... I think I'd have probably had to have phoned in sick the next day and said, "Look, I'm sorry."
I think X would have been shut down.
Yes, X would have been
shut down by now if she got in power. Keir Starmer would have lapped that up. Yet he's there in front of Trump pretending he loves free speech.
He loves all of that. Oh, Mr. President. Let's move to that story that we referenced yesterday on the programme. Migrant hotel numbers rising as asylum claims hit a record high. I mean, it's sometimes... And I'm sure you notice this in your job, Chloe. We see these numbers, these big numbers, so regularly that there is a real danger that you sort of gloss over it. You know, you just think, oh, we're used to seeing, oh, look, 1,000 people this week crossed the channel on a rubber dinghy. Yeah, it happens all the time. It's very easy to get blasé about it because it's so rare. Nearly 40,000 migrants housed in hotels, £8 million a day it's costing us. I mean, it's curious that story came out on the day that Starmer was at the White House with a president who is doing something about immigration.
How convenient.
Maybe not as much as he's saying he's doing, but he's still doing more than we are. And we're in this strange place where it's become almost acceptable. 8 million quid a day, that's what we have to do.
I think that the people running the country are blasé about it and just think, what the hell, they've been coming in for ages. We'll just keep on just letting it. We'll just turn a blind eye to it. But I don't think the British public are blasé about it. I think they're absolutely furious when they're having to see cuts. We're having to see winter fuel payment cuts and all the rest of it to save a bit of cash. But apparently we've got, nearly 6 billion quid a year to spend on the asylum system. It's just a complete joke. And even if you really, really want people to come to the UK that are struggling, I think most of us can at least agree that putting those people up in hotels, giving them free room and board, whilst we've got people in this country who are British, who are living on the streets and not getting the help they need, pensioners freezing, unable to pay their heating bills, the priorities are just not right. And it's more gaslighting from the government because they told us that they were going to end the use of migrant hotels in 12 months. That's what they pledged to us. Then they've now decided, I don't know if you saw the announcement, I think last week, that actually it's going to be until at least the end of Parliament. So 2029. That they're going to end the use of migrant hotels. And I could forgive them slightly if they'd at least made a little bit of progress on it. But no, the number is going up. They have opened even more migrant hotels. And this is really devastating small communities. When they are opening up migrant hotels with 300-400 guys with nothing to do in a little village with only a couple hundred people in it, that's going to have a big impact.
And it has a big impact if you've got one of those businesses just off the lobby of a hotel that's had to close down. It's another little hidden story there. We don't hear very much. A little nail bar or a salon or, some sort of boutique, a small news agents. What as you do in some of these hotels, all of those have to go. You're just closed down overnight almost. You might get a little bit of compo, I don't know. But the hotel companies, they're doing all right at it. They've got guaranteed bookings at top rate for almost the rest of time, it seems. So it's a story that's not going to go away, and my very real sense is this is going to get a whole lot worse again before it starts to get better.
What tourists are going to want to go and visit a place that's full of migrant hotels? You're losing all that tourism trade if it is a tourism hotspot, right?
Correct. And this story, anti-net zero politicians will make voters poorer, according to a climate chief. This is the Emma Pinchbeck says net zero isn't about restrictions. People can still eat meat and fly, but cleaner, smarter tech should be the default. And if you start politicians who tell voters that this isn't the case are making voters poorer. They say that households with fossil fuel boilers will pay £750 per year more than those with heat pumps, and petrol car drivers will pay £700 more than EV owners. I mean, I've never seen so much nonsense written down in one place, frankly. I mean, firstly, at the moment, do these people know what it costs to get a heat pump fitted in the first place? To buy one, fit one, retrofit if you've got a house that's not really there to accommodate. I mean, it's like thousands of pounds for one of the things. To buy an EV car in the first place, probably going to cost you many thousands more for an equivalent of a petrol car. I mean, in 100 years' time, it might be cheaper, but not now and not anytime soon.
Well, look, I understand where they are coming from on this, but I think that Ed Miliband's approach to net zero is making people poorer. I think this debate is very polarised, where you have people on one extreme and the other, and not people talking common sense in the middle. The reality is that renewables, although they are expensive as it stands at the moment, those are the ones that are going to get cheaper over time, whereas fossil fuels are going to get more expensive and more scarce. So we do need to move to renewables absolutely over time. But when we are doing idiotic things like Ed Miliband's plans to put cement in the ground in the last gas wells in Britain, closing down steelworks and whatnot to then just ship it in from abroad, closing down our access to gas, fossil fuels, when we are nowhere near in a position to be 100% reliant on renewables, is just idiotic and is making people poorer. And that is what is making people really, really angry.
Yeah. Final one, just a brief word on this. Annalise Dodds, the Development Minister, has resigned over the government's cut to the aid budget. I'm bound to ask, any relation, Chloe?
No. Well, my surname's Dobbs, not Dodds.
Well,
so,
sorry, yes, she's Dodds. You're Dodds. Yes.
But most people.
It would have been awful if you'd have
Dodds
said, yes, she's my mum. And after everything I've said about her in the last hour, I would have died on the spot. She's gone. She says it's about the aid budget. I mean, you could say, well, you know, she's a person of principle. You might give her that if that's how she feels. I don't think the government's going to collapse over this one.
No, I don't think so. I mean, this is a women's minister who doesn't actually know what a woman is. We had that released clip from or released transcript from a BBC podcast where she didn't know what a woman is. So I'd rather have someone as a women's minister who does know what a woman is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these people.
I don't know who they're going to replace her with. It could be someone worse.
She is the dictionary definition of mediocrity when it comes to politics. I mean, these people they have no idea how to read a room. I don't know what they stand for, who they think is listening to them. These parochial audiences that might give them a round of applause at a WI meeting in Rhyl on a cold, wet Wednesday afternoon, perhaps. But beyond that, who are they? Who are these people? Who are they? As somebody once said, I have no idea. Nothing's going to happen here. This gives you an idea when you look at, I've been saying this in the last hour, you look at some of the characters in the Trump administration. I know he's got some curious bookings in there. I know it's not conventional, and I'm sure some of them, you know, won't be as successful as he thinks. But what he has got right at the top table are real business brains, people who know how to run stuff, people who've made a fortune out of running businesses, who know how to make a buck, who know how to operate, who know how the system works. We've got David Lammy and Rachel Reeves, and throw in Angela Rayner.
No business experience in the cabinet.
None.
All people who have pretty much all been public servants most of their life. And it's showing. It's shown in the budget, which was completely nonsensical in many ways. They have got no idea how to grow the economy. If they had a few entrepreneurs in that cabinet, they'd probably be doing a lot better at the moment.
I think so. Listen, Chloe, great to have you with us as always. Chloe Dobbs, political commentator, with us on the programme. 0344 499 1000. Over to you in a couple of moments. Loads of comments coming in. We threw that question out. How well did Starmer do yesterday at the White House? Your response on that. But in addition, anything else that we've thrown into the mix as well. Love your views. Lines are open. This is Talk.
They need help. I'll always be with the British, okay? I'll always be with them. But they don't need help. You look at their career, you have done very well over the years, haven't you?
We have. I'm very proud of our country. And we've also always been there backing each other up between our two countries. That is why this is the greatest alliance for prosperity and security I think the world has ever seen. Whenever necessary, we've absolutely backed each other up, and that's at the core.
Could you take on Russia by yourselves?
Well...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Nikki says, what's the George Soros connection to Trump that you referenced? I heard you half say it, but missed it. No, I didn't half say it. I said it. You half heard it, I think is what you... There is a bit of a distinction there. You know, I'm just making the point. The point I made was that in Trump's administration, two of the biggest and most important figures are the Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, and the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. These are both very rich, incredible operators in the world of business. They've made a fortune out of it. They know how to turn a dime into a buck and beyond. They know how to do this. That's what they've done all their life. It's genius that Trump has those kind of people right on the inside of it. I merely made the reference that Scott Bessent, his business partner, George Soros, by the way, I don't think they're business partners anymore. He's in government and both had many, many businesses, but it was him and Soros that really, managed to seal the big financial empire. And of course George Soros is often seen as the WEF lovey and the orchestrator of the deep state and the man who's secretly controlling your life. Is that an interesting connection? Well, personally I don't think it is at all. No more than it's two millionaires who have had a joint enterprise and a business together for many, many years and done rather well out of it. I don't believe in the Soros stuff, although he does look like a weirdo, I'll give you that. Let's go here to Anthony in Surrey. Anthony, how are you doing?
Good, thank you, Ian. Good. Nice to speak to you.
And you too. Well, what are you making of it then? Our man in the Oval Office, how did he do?
Well, the boy done good for once with Starmer. First time I've been impressed with him since he came in. And he played it really well, I think. He didn't play it trying to be too fawning. Some people say he had, but I don't think he did. He didn't try to be American, didn't put on an American accent. So that was a good thing. He didn't.
Oh, that would be awful, wouldn't it? If he just went, how you doing? That would have been a moment. Wow.
Well, it even had Trump praising his accent, which I never had before. He said,
That was quite a nice moment, actually. I'd love to be able to speak like that, he said, didn't he? But, I mean, that's something people don't often say about Keir Starmer over here.
Exactly, but the thing that was absolute blinder was serving that, I say it quite deliberately so, because it's a solicitor's trick to serve on people something, isn't it? A writ.
Ah, do you think there was something, like, symbolic in that?
Yes, I think it was for the cameras, obviously. It was very theatrical, but it's more to it than that. It's more than just cosmetic. It's more than just glitter and pomp. I think this gives Starmer a good hold on Trump.
Well, we're the only country that could have done that because we have a royal family. So he can meet Macron and Macron can play arm wrestling or whatever the heck it was they did a couple of days before. They can do all of that. But no one can say, the king has sent me with an invite for you. So I guess it's a card if you can play. I mean, they would have had a lot of meetings beforehand to decide whether that could happen. And the king would have had to have said, yeah, I'm OK with that, and then signed the letter himself. So, yeah, I guess, look, I said it earlier, Anthony, if you're a Lib Dem and Ed Davey did it, you'd have thought it was amazing. If Starmer does it, you think if you're a Reform UK person and Nigel Farage did it, you'd have said it was a stroke of genius. If Starmer does it, it looks ridiculous. So it's confirmation bias, isn't it? But I think the overall idea was a sound one.
Exactly. Also, it's very transactional with Trump because we know how he operates, and it gives Starmer a little kind of leverage because if, say, Trump goes back on everything, he can say, well, we may downgrade this somewhat to a slightly less glittery state visit.
Yes, you're going to Bromley for a couple of days.
They have renovations, so I have to make it, I don't know, Croydon, something like this.
Well, yes. I mean, there's no need to go that bad, frankly, Anthony.
They They've got a palace there.
Yes, that's very true. I was in Croydon a couple of Thursdays ago. In fact, I'll be there next Thursday as well. So I should probably keep that view to myself. Let's stay where you are a second, Anthony. Let me just bring in Ben in Essex. Ben.
Yes, Ian, you there?
How you do? Yeah, good. You just heard what Anthony said. He thought the boy did good, but you're not so sure he did.
I mean, I don't know. What's that saying? Climbing the greasy pole. You know, when you work in an office environment, there's always that one guy that sucks up to the boss, and you think, oh God, what's he saying? That's the impression I got from Starmer. You know, no credentials, no nothing, just sucking up.
Did you? And Anthony, you didn't glean that from this.
No. He had no choice. He had to suck up. There's no question. He had absolutely no choice with everything that's holding on this, including Ukraine, the future of Europe.
Yeah.
But I think he played it pretty good.
How else should he have played it? Because there is a sort of a built-in suck-upness about that kind of visit, isn't there?
I think when you're a low-energy person and you've got nothing, and you know you're on the back foot because you're a liar and you stand for, what you stand for. Trump is confidence, and he knows what he stands for, and he's got every confidence in that. Starmer is a sneaky, slimy, two-faced liar, and when you're that sort of person, and you're up against, the truth. I mean, I love it when he got called out by Vance. Vance absolutely, he's
on the free speech thing.
Free speech, and I just think he knew then, Starmer. He thought, actually, and I think that kind of says it all, really.
Go on, Anthony.
He played it good, with the difficult hands. He played the cards he had very well with one trump card, as you might say.
I like what you did there.
I mean, the thing is, what does he actually stand for, Starmer? He doesn't stand for free speech. He's got nothing to say that he's done that promotes that.
I mean, that's a fair point, Anthony, isn't it? It's if you had to, if you were charged as a politics student, right, what is the inner philosophical core, politically speaking, of Keir Starmer? What would the answer to that be?
He's essentially had to become a blue Labour, a bit like Blair, so he's learning fast to suck up to the American president and get in another term. That's something we need.
Is that possible? Do you think, Ben, that he could turn? I mean, Blair was. I mean, some people say Blair actually had his core was still a socialist. I'm not sure he was, but do you think Starmer will find himself turning more to the right, if for no other reason domestically, to ward off Reform UK, and internationally to be in bed with Donald Trump?
No, I don't think that you should bend and weave any different to what you actually, stand for, what you believe in. I mean, if you're trying to bend, then what do you actually stand for? I think that he's trying to people please and trying to gaslight the public, and all these policies are not benefiting the people of Great Britain. I mean, when he got called out on free speech yesterday, he had nothing to say, and he was backtracking.
Anthony?
I thought, up until yesterday, I generally thought Starmer was as stiff as a board, was a political stiff, but now I think he's double jointed. He's found something there.
He's actually he's the first double jointed Prime Minister, Ben.
Yeah.
I mean, at least he's got something to say about himself, hasn't he?
Yeah.
I don't know. I just think he knows he's stuck. He knows he's out his depth, and he looked weak. And we can all see it. We can all say it. The British public are not behind him, and he knows it.
But wouldn't anybody, Ben, in that position? I said at the beginning of the show, I can imagine Rishi Sunak not faring much better in that situation.
No, I don't think so either. But, both of them were weak, pathetic leaders. They don't stand for anything the British public wants. They know it. They're on the back foot. When you're in that position, you've got no choice but to lie.
True. Can I just say...
Anthony?
Yeah, I mean, I think he'd probably played it a lot better than Boris would have done, because I think Boris would have just sucked up shamelessly and with a saucer of milk, you might say. And
thrown a bit of Latin into the equation.
Exactly. Yeah. That's it, yeah.
We might be there. Listen, guys, thank you. Anthony in Surrey, Ben in Essex, on Keir Starmer, 0344 499 1000. More from you on the way. How well did Starmer do? The climate change story, the migrant hotel story, the new NHS money that's going into puberty blockers for... Hear the word, children. Details on that. We've got tech a little later with Will Guy. So much to get through. 0344 499 1000.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is a fascinating story. I don't know if you caught this, but Suella Braverman thinks Englishness is about ancestry and heritage and not birthplace. She, in fact, argues she isn't English, despite being born here. The former Home Secretary says her Indian roots and a lack of generational ties to England means she identifies as British Asian instead. Braverman warns that mass migration and multiculturalism have watered down English identity and says it's time to figure out what it really means before it's gone for good. And you remember a couple of weeks ago there was a sort of fringe debate. It didn't really take hold about whether Rishi Sunak could call himself English. He is English. He was born in Southampton, I think, but it was being argued, well, he's not really English, or is he? Sundar Katwala is Director of British Future to help us out on this one. Sundar, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Well, firstly, I'm going to ask you, are you English?
I'm English. I identify as English. I was born in this country. My parents are from India and from Ireland. One of my first experiences being English when I was 7 or 8. England really struggling to qualify for the World Cup. We didn't know if Kevin Keegan would be fit. I was a football-obsessed 7-year-old. No one said, Sundar, this has got nothing to do with you. Go away. You can't support England. I don't think it would have helped if they had. India won the Cricket World Cup. My dad was really pleased. I was pleased for him, but I was supporting England, actually, and we've been to test matches, and I've supported England, and he supported India. So I can respect Suella Braverman not feeling English, but I think she should respect me feeling English, because we then had a debate where people didn't count John Barnes' goals because he was black, or sent bullets to civil regis. And I remember by the time I was a teenager, that debate was over. When Paul Ince captained the England team, had blood in his shirt when we were qualifying, we weren't still debating whether Paul Ince could be English or Marcus Rashford could be English. So I see no value in a strong and good consensus than we've ever had before over the last 30 years in now reversing all of that and saying absolutely crazy things like it will take 5 or 6 generations for my kids to be English. We were there as a family when the Lionesses beat Germany. We don't need 5 generations to be English. We were there being English on the day.
If I was trying to think of this, because the first thing I would say, Sandra, I was slightly surprised that this debate sort of come up at all, really, bearing in mind it's 2025 and, you know, I thought that kind of stuff had been sort of discussed maybe in the 70s or whatever and long gone. Then, as you will be aware, there was this sort of Rishi Sunak moment a couple of weeks ago where somebody was questioning, I can't even remember who it was, but certainly suggesting that Rishi can't claim to be English despite being born in England because of his ancestry, his lineage, his parents, etc. But the only thing I was wondering, as you were speaking then, if there's lots of white English people who went to work in India and had kids, those kids would be white, but they were born in India. Could they claim to be Indian?
I mean, they can. I think India does that. Sonia Gandhi thinks she's Indian. Her parents were Italian. It's much harder to claim to be Japanese. I'm not really here to debate how you become Japanese. I'm interested in how you become British and English. It's got its own culture. It's very easy to become Canadian or American. Now, English is a bit different to Britishness. So when my dad came here, he did what migrants always do, which is he identified as British, became British, stayed British citizenship identity. He didn't feel he became English as well. And very few people born abroad do. But when their children are born in England, the children find it more open, and that's been true for 1,000 years. Actually, the children. So it's a bit less open. I think Black Englishness is more familiar. It'll be 50 years since Viv Anderson won a cap than Asian Englishness. But if Maureen Ali tells us he's English when he's batting for England, we accept it. We welcome it. So Englishness is birthplace and feeling you identify and other people accepting you. And more than 3/4 of white people agree on that. Ethnic minorities were a bit slower to know that white people felt that and to identify, but the sporting symbolism has done something really important. And we shouldn't just leave it for the football team. We should have St George's Day and invite everybody to the party.
Yeah, you've managed to mention Viv Anderson and Cyril Regis in one interview. I mean, full house points for that, son. I mean, they don't get any greater than those two in different sports. But listen, her point, Suella's point, is that being English is about ancestry and heritage. So... And therefore she describes herself as British Asian for that reason. And almost almost saying, you know, she hasn't got a right to call herself English because that would be just demonstrably inaccurate, I think is her point.
We can respect it if she feels like that. You know, the children of the Irish felt like that in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, and the children of the Irish don't feel like that anymore because it was more fraught. So we can respect that, but why can't she respect Marcus Rashford, who thinks he's English and everybody thinks he's English? So, I mean, her view was quite common, I think, 40, 50 years ago. It's becoming less common. It's really odd that she says it takes 5 or 6 generations, because she's saying my children's hypothetical children can't be English until they've worn the L plates for 3 more lifetimes. My children have got the level of Indian ethnicity that Sebastian Coe had. And they identify as English and white, which surprised me because I tick mixed race in a sense. So pro-integration is to invite people to identify and celebrate it when they do. She's telling us that no Jewish people in this country are English. I don't think she's noticed that. I don't think she would make the argument that Rashford isn't English, that Wayne Rooney can't be English on her
because of his Irish lineage, yeah.
Yeah, so she can't really seriously think that. If she seriously argued the logic of her piece, the Conservative Party would have to chuck her out. And I think she just didn't think about the argument. Let's respect her choice to be British Asian and not English. But she should respect Priti Patel, Rishi Sunak, Sajid Javid, who identify as English and British. It's good for integration, they do. And let's fly the flag together.
Yeah, interesting the point you mentioned about the Irish as well. Because I suppose, I mean, does it to a degree, I don't know, does it sort of depend on, you mentioned Japan or China, and I know we're not talking about that specifically, but is it a colour thing she's picking up on here more than anything?
Yeah, it's about colour, and when she says industry means colour. But Hamza Yusuf was Scottish. He was a Scottish First Minister. Vaughan Gething was Welsh. Now, Englishness is different. We haven't got a parliament. It's a cultural identity. But Black and Asian people born and bred in this country know about Shakespeare, know about the language, know about the literature. There's enormous Commonwealth influence. So Suella Braverman doesn't have to feel English at all. But she should not be telling Black and Asian people that they can't be English for 5 generations. And just because you're Asian yourself, you can't expel all of the English people from Englishness who are also ethnic minorities just because you don't feel it. So respect her view, but come on, Suella, respect other people who feel English, and don't take integration backwards 5 generations. We've actually made enormous progress on it in my lifetime.
OK, Sunda, thank you, as ever. Sunda Katwala, the Director of British Future. Suella Braverman, we did invite Suella Braverman on. She was not available to talk to us. She will hopefully in the future, however. So she thinks Englishness is about ancestry and heritage, not birthplace. And I think she went on to say that it'll be a few kids or something before they can go, yeah, we're English. So what's the cut-off point on that then? Rishi Sunak is not English, according to one commentator a couple of weeks ago, even though he was born, I think he was born in Southampton. I'm pretty sure he was born in Southampton. His parents had a son of a pharmacist, did you know? Like son of a toolmaker. Anyway, he's born in England, regardless of where it was. And he would define as being English. And Suella's point is you can't be, that Rishi Sunak is not English. He would have to describe himself as British Asian based on her own criteria. I don't think she's insisting we change any policies. But I do think it's rather interesting. And maybe you can respond to this if you're somebody who has got mixed heritage or your parents are both from somewhere else. I don't know if you're... It is country dependent, isn't it? And is it colour dependent as well? Because I mean, people I think like to hang on to stuff these days, more so than they ever did. So if you meet someone whose great-grandmother was Italian, you know, you often meet an English person who quite likes essentially saying they're more Italian than English. Well, no, you're born in Cleethorpes, mate. You're not. You're English. So it sort of goes the other way, where there's something quite cool about identifying or partly identifying with one aspect of your lineage. I don't know. I sense that it's something to do more with colour than it is with anything else. If your parents were American and you were born in England, would you call yourself American or would you call yourself English? You'd have to at some point, if you were divvying it up, you'd have to have English in there somewhere, surely, wouldn't you? Because you were born here. You can't ignore that aspect of it. Thoughts on that? 0344 499 1000. Ian is in Bridgend. Ian, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Hello, Ian. How are you? All right?
Yeah, good, thanks.
Yeah, just intrigued by all this discussion of English. I have a chuckle from time to time when the Lotus Eaters, they seem to agonise over this problem all the time. David Stark, the others have said, the English are a mongrel race, aren't you? Your Angles, your Saxons, your bits of this, bits of that.
Yeah.
But, what's the fuss about? But I do take exception when you say about Britishness, because, of course, the Britons, the Cymry, well, the English term is the Welsh then, don't they? But
so the Britishness is really a geographical phrase, right?
Well, no, I suppose it's sort of race. It's possibly geographical to some extent, only to the extent that the British were moved to the margins.
Yeah.
The Cornwall, Devon, Wales, southern Scotland, Strathclyde and so on.
Sure.
But it does tickle me really, the agonising over this Englishness and.
Where do you? My great grandmother was Irish, so where? I mean, do I throw that into the pie chart when I'm working stuff out?
DNA, I'm Welsh. I go back to the 1600s as far as I can with the census and some church records. We all came from West Wales, from Ceredigion, Cardiganshire, as you'd know it.
Yep.
And then my grandmother's family then, mostly from North Wales, Joneses they were, so most common up
So
there.
your lot have never been outside of Wales,
well,
in the family tree terms.
Yeah, but saying that, in terms of DNA, the Welsh and the Irish, we were fairly indistinguishable. We were always knocking lumps out of each other across across the channels there. But it does tickle me all this agonising about Englishness. It's
what is it?
That's right.
There it is. Listen, Ian, thank you for that. It's a great input from you as a Welshman as well, in your own background as a qualified voice there. Thank you. 0344 499 1000. Is it only the English that would wrestle with this? Is it about colour? Is it about something? I don't really know, to be honest. I think that Rishi Sunak is entitled to say he's English because he was born here and he became the Prime Minister of the country as well. I think, there's enough evidence there. Braverman chooses not to, what's the phrase, identify as English, but British Asian. 0344 499 1000 is where you will find us. Back with more comment from you in a few moments. Before we do all of that, time to find out if you haven't heard this already. Oh, man alive, where have you been? Oh, by the way, Voice of Doom, brand new voice on its way in a second. Before that, talk about chances to win. This could be a chance for you to win £25,000.
Time's running out to get involved in our 25 grand competition. Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to win this life-changing amount of money for 2025. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that, but time is running out. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
they need help, I'll always be with the British, okay? I'll always be with them. But they don't need help. You look at their career, you have done very well over the years, haven't you?
We have. I'm very proud of our country. And but we've also always been there backing each other up between our two countries. That is why this is the greatest alliance for prosperity and security I think the world has ever seen. Whenever necessary, we've absolutely backed each other up, and that's at the
Could you
core
take
of
on Russia by yourselves?
Well...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side.
It is Talk. Welcome back. The home of Common Sense, 10 to 3. Back with you in a moment. Before that, Voice of Doom. Day one, brand new voice. Yesterday's voice, it went like that. We thought this thing was going to run forever. It was one in a second. So we've got a brand new one today. It's the political mystery voice. Can you identify who this is?
Love him or loathe him.
Or who's that? Remember, don't call in. There is no prize. However, if you want to have a crack at it, you can message in 87222. Here it is again.
Love him or loathe him.
Love him or loathe him. Who is that? If we get a right answer, we'll tell you who it is on the other side of the news at 3 o'clock. If we don't, it rolls over to Monday. Here it is one more time.
Love him or loathe him.
87222 if you think you know. By the way, there's been another twist in the BBC Gaza Gate documentary fiasco, and boy, it is a fiasco. Now counter-terror police are investigating claims the BBC broke the law by paying the family of a Hamas official's son. The BBC have admitted paying the boy's family, but denied any money went to Hamas, a prescribed terrorist organisation. This could all have been very easily dealt with had the BBC done a little bit of due diligence at the very beginning, done basic fact-checking. Doesn't take very much, just have a cursory look at what's happening. Let me explain how this works, okay? An outside company says to the BBC, this is generally how it works, and I'm sure it was something like this in this case. An outside company says to the BBC, we've got the opportunity to make a documentary about Gaza through the eyes of, the young people living in a bomb site, basically. The BBC go, that sounds very good, we'll commission it. Now, arguably, at that point, I think the BBC should have been in possession of all of the facts that we now know. Whether they were, whether they weren't, we have yet to establish. Documentary gets made with £400,000 of taxpayers' money, and they come back with a product, and the BBC say, thank you very much, independent company, for making the programme. We're going to stick it on the telly. What they failed to mention are some troubling, serious, and frankly horrendous connections to Hamas. Namely that the kid fronting the documentary is the son of a senior Hamas politician. Hamas are terrorists, therefore those who are members of that government are also equally as implicated in the term terrorism. It just goes with the territory. You don't have to be political in any way just to basically work out that link. The kid that fronted it was the son of a terrorist, okay? It goes and gets even worse than that, because other kids that were featured also had connections with senior elements, like the police, for example. The cameraman that was on the crew of the documentary, seen celebrating on social media when October the 7th happened. There are other connections. It keeps dripping in. None of this, absolutely none of this, was discovered to be either relevant or apparently unknown by the BBC. Whichever way it was, it is frankly a journalistic crime, if no other, of such magnitude that it beggars belief that maybe it doesn't beg belief that the likes of Gary Lineker and various other good and great from the world of the British media signed a letter. I think it was about 500 or 600 of these half-wits who signed a letter to say that it's terrible that the BBC took this documentary down. They should put it back up. I mean, who are these people? These are meant to be media-savvy people who cannot, for the life of them, spot a journalistic blunder of such magnitude. They can't see that. They don't want to see that, is the real answer to this. Get in the bin, Gary Lineker, and all of those who, shame on you, who signed a letter saying that this documentary should be put back up on the TV. It's unbelievable that anyone would hold that view. I don't care whether you're left-wing or right-wing. I think even Starmer understands what happened here. Left-wing or right, anyone should know that journalistically that's a bear trap of an error, the greatest hole you could fall into, to not acknowledge editorially, not put large on the screen, this is a documentary about Gaza. By the way, the kid that's fronting the documentary is the son of a senior member of Hamas, the terror organisation. And that was not mentioned. And Lineker and it's so serious that the counter-terror police are now investigating this. Yesterday, the BBC gave a lengthy, and some would describe it as a grovelling apology. So the BBC themselves have apologised. The police are now involved. And Gary Lineker says there's nothing to see here. The man's a nut job. I'm telling you now, people like that who've trousered gazillions in taxpayers' money over the years, whether they're actors, presenters, probably some journalists in there, whoever they happen to be, should never work at BBC Towers ever, should never be given a gig there again. If that is your assessment of this, that there was nothing to see here and this should go back on the telly, you are an idiot. It's as simple as that. How much more evidence do you need? The BBC themselves, those involved in it, fessing up, yeah, we did use the son of a Hamas man in the documentary to front it, and now the counter-terrorism, please. Come on. But nothing to see here. Good Lord. Georgina is down in London. Forgive the rant, Georgina. Take us back to Donald Trump and Keir Starmer. What are you making of it?
Right, I'm going to have a bit of a rant myself, so hold on to your chair. I don't know these people who've been what they've been watching, saying that Keir Starmer's done a good job. To me, it was an absolute disgrace. It was between Captain America and Mr. Bean. I expected nothing, and I wasn't disappointed. You know, the difference between these two men is Trump actually loves his country and the people of America, and we have got nothing off Starmer. Vance pulled him up on freedom of speech. How he sat there, barefaced, lied to that man. You know, I'd love for him to go and have a word with the old dear who was visited by detectives a couple of weeks ago. All the people that are in prison for writing hurty tweets. It's an absolute disgrace. He's got nothing out of that meeting whatsoever. I mean, the rest of the UK has no respect for Starmer whatsoever, and that goes for Trump. It was pure lip service from Trump. Trump knows what he is. He knows what he said about him. Keir Starmer said he loved this country. I nearly choked on my dinner, let me tell you. Keir Starmer is a pathological liar. He's got more faces than Big Ben.
Yeah.
It's an absolute... I was totally embarrassed.
Trump's had his relationship with the truth as well, of course, over the years, it should be said, even if you're a Trump supporter. Listen, Georgina, we hit the clock. Very passionate stuff. Great to hear that view. That's her thoughts. Do you want to counter that in any shape or form? 0344 499 1000. That does seem to be a fairly common view I'm hearing today. Thoughts on that? Lots to wade through in the next hour as well. We're taking calls on all the issues we've been debating here in response to our guests, whether it's about what Englishness really is, whether it's about DNA, goodness knows what else. The lines are open. Oh, and the mystery voice. Here's the voice.
Love him or loathe him.
Who is that? 87222. Lines are open. Let's get the news headlines at 3 o'clock here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 3 minutes after 3 o'clock. Welcome back to the home of common sense. We're nearly in the weekend, kids. That's a good feeling, right? Well, unless you're working over the entirety of the weekend. Coming up in this hour, we've been continue to take your calls on Keir Starmer. Back from Washington, his feet have hit terra firma, but he's upbeat after a, quote, better than expected meeting with Donald Trump, who's offered sort of a trade deal that could exempt the UK from US tariffs. We're going to watch with interest. Could take a while to get that up and running. We need to see the seeds at least very soon. Also this afternoon, prisoners could face Texas-style reforms, losing automatic early release and having to earn it through good behaviour credits in what could be the biggest overhaul in sentencing for 30 years. Always suspicious about those stories. You think, well, if it worked that well, wouldn't we have done it before? Well, maybe not. Is it worth giving it a go? Details to come. And millions have been left unable to access their money on payday as app glitches have struck several major banks across the UK. And we've also got an extraordinary revelation from Microsoft that has just broken. What is it that Microsoft are going to be ditching later this year? Find out more as we look at that and the other big tech stories of the day. 0344 499 1000. Right, voice of doom before we go any further. This was the voice we played you before the news.
Love him or loathe him.
These are some of the guesses. William Hague, good Lord, no. Paul Warren, no. Ed Miliband, it is not. Douglas Hume, no. Andy Burnham, no. Wes Streeting, no. But was it Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker of the House? Let's hear the voice again.
Love him or loathe him.
No, it isn't. But we have actually got a right answer. Philip Davis is the right answer. Philip Davis, up until just July, of course, was the MP for Shipley. He was there for a good number of years, a Conservative, back in 2012, 10, something like that. I think 2010, I'm going to say, he was elected. So he did, a decade and a half. Tad was the person that first came through with the right answer. Philip Davis, MP, former MP, married now to Esther McVeigh. I didn't think that was going to go quite so quickly. So that's 2 days out of 2 that you have scuppered us by banging in there with the correct answer early doors. We'll have a brand new one on Monday. Now, prisoners could face a Texas-style reform, losing automatic early release, and the only way to get that would be these things called good behaviour credits. This is the Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, who recently visited Texas to study how the state cut its prison population and reduced reoffending with radical changes. Is that what is needed? She says inmates may also be forced to work full-time or risk longer sentences in what could be the biggest overhaul in prison sentencing for 3 decades. Tom Wheatley is president of the Prisoner Governors Association. Always good to get your views on these things, Tom. I did say in the intro there, you might think something like this had been tried before. I'm sure you're going to tell me it probably has, or it's certainly been talked about before. Is this the way forward? Oh, we can't hear. Oh, we can hear you now, Tom. Apologies.
Yep.
Do start that answer again if you could.
So what is good news is we're actually looking at what works elsewhere in the world. That's a good thing to do, because what we really need to concentrate on is what is shown to work, what there's evidence for working, rather than what we have been doing, which is making fairly knee-jerk reactions in terms of how we use prison and how we sentence people, based on, not based on research, not based on evidence, but based on a gut feeling. So I'm pleased that we're out there and looking. I would say Texas is a very different place to the UK. I've been over there myself some years ago. Population of Texas is about half that of England and Wales. We've got about 88,000 people in prison, and in Texas they've got about 130,000 people currently.
Wow.
So the rate of incarceration in Texas is way higher than it is in England and Wales currently, and probably not one that we could afford. However, having a process where how people behave in prison, how they engage with the things that are likely to reduce their risk of reoffending in the future, as a way of minimising the amount of their sentence that they spend in custody, it isn't necessarily a bad idea. It's something that we could choose to do. But what we've got to do, if we are going to do that, is give prisoners the opportunities to work, provide them with the workplaces. I know of a number of prisons around the country at the moment that aren't even operating to their full capacity in terms of prisoner work areas because the roofs are leaking, because the buildings haven't been effectively maintained, because there hasn't been the money to do it. Yeah. So, all of this can work, but it's got to be properly considered and properly invested in to enable it to do so.
Yeah, and I would imagine, there's things on paper that look good don't always work in practice, of course. And I was listening to one former prison governor, I think it was, who was saying that one of the problems with getting prisoners to work, for example, sometimes there's not enough. Literally not enough to do. So you often find yourself that C Wing is the cleanest place on planet Earth, because you've got so many prisoners out there mopping the place just in order to get people out their cells doing something.
I mean, that is true, Ian. There are a number of our prisons that are, their name is, they're training prisons. They're prisons that are designed for people to learn new skills and people to work in them, but there isn't actually enough capacity for everybody to have a full-time job. So these are the kind of things that we would need to work through. These are the kind of things that we need to fully understand. But the bottom line is something has got to change. What we are currently doing isn't working. We could choose to send as many people to prison as they do in Texas, if that's what government want to do. But that would have to be funded. And the only place that money is going to come from is from the taxpayer. Yeah. So, you can only have what you're prepared to pay for. What we're currently doing isn't working because we're running prisons that are, in many cases, dangerous and decrepit. And they are not the places where people will be reformed. They are not the places where people will learn new skills and find a way of turning their life around. You can only do that if you're in a place where you feel safe, and where you're working and living in an environment that allows you to go to work. You can't do it when it's raining in through the roof.
Yeah, true. When you look at prisons, what if you had a magic wand, Tom? And obviously, prison governors have a say over their own prison, but you're also at the mercy of budgets and governmental and Department of Justice directives, etc. So there's a lot of other parties involved. You can't just change the system overnight on your own. But what has there ever been one thing you've looked at and thought, and if only we did this, things might be better?
So I think that we are an overcrowded prison system. So there are around just under 20,000 people living in overcrowded conditions in our prisons. They're living in prisons that were built by Victorians. So if we could get the population to a level, either by building additional prison space or by reducing the number of people in prison where we weren't overcrowded, we would stand a chance of being able to make prisons places of change, places of reform for prisoners. The real issue is about what happens to people when they get out of custody. Because if we could doesn't matter all the good work we do and all the good work that prisoners do, because they've got to want to change themselves. If we drop them back into the same circumstance they were in when they came out, that's going to make things incredibly difficult for them. If they haven't got somewhere safe to live, if they haven't got a means of legitimately earning money, they have limited options. So it's the things that prisoners have when they get out of prisons that are really important if they're going to make a go of it and they're going to avoid coming back.
Yeah, I mean, you must have lost count over the years of how many prisoners you've met and thought, what the hell are you doing in here? There really is no reason or purpose that prison is the right setting or the right punishment for that kind of crime or that kind of person, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I mean, there are certainly people in prison who prison doesn't feel like the right place for them. People with really serious substance misuse issues, people with enduring mental health problems that are at the heart of their offending. That doesn't mean that they're not dangerous. That doesn't mean that they're not doing things to harm the public. But it does mean that the way of changing that and the way of dealing with that is something other than what they're sentenced to. We need to find a really clear link between what we're sentencing someone to and how we're going to use that to change them. And that relies on the best evidence to sentences so that they know that sending somebody to prison might be absolutely the right thing for them. But they know who those people are and they have other options available when it's not.
Listen, Tom, thank you. Always thorough stuff. Tom Wheatley, president of the Prison Governors Association. Is that what we need? I'm pretty sure I'm like most people. God, doing this job, you report on horrendous crimes, the worst kind of crimes, and we've seen some real horror stories, haven't we, in the last few years? We all have quite forthright and robust opinions on how we would deal with people who've carried out that kind of level of criminality and, murder, abuse, whatever it happens to be. And we tend to sort of agree, you throw the book at somebody. But there's another bit of me that thinks, if this doesn't work, but then I look at the kind of, the sort of scrope man. As a prison governor once said to me, it's that lot over there on that wing that are the problem. Oddly, the lifers don't cause a problem because they're here for life and they tend not to be a big issue on the inside, but it's the recurring prisoners that are in and out. And most of those kind of people, what they call petty, it's not so petty. You did armed robbery and shoplifting and nicking cars and goodness knows what else, maybe setting fire to the odd squirrel or whatever it is you do. Those kind of people are not... are people that usually had loads of non-custodial sentences before they even get to prison. If you went out and stole a car tomorrow, you wouldn't go to jail. If you did it again next week, you wouldn't go to jail. If you then went shoplifting on a Tuesday, you wouldn't go to jail, and you robbed a house on a Thursday, you probably still wouldn't go to jail. You'd get a lot of non-custodial sentences. So it's all very well to say, well, we need to look at non-custodial stuff because that surely is the way forward. Well, most of those habitual reoffenders have been through all of that. They've done all of that loads of times. And that doesn't work either. It probably comes back to the electronic tag thing, but again, that we know there are shortcomings with that. Comments coming in from you. Bill in Fleet says the Hamas documentary, the press should be doorstepping every single person who signed the petition asking, now that the counter-terrorist police are investigating the BBC for sending 400 million quid to Hamas, will you retract your support? Yeah, I don't know whether, to be fair, just to be accurate about that, I don't think Hamas would get... It cost $400,000 to make the documentary. The child would have been... There would have been some fee involved. I don't know how that was paid or how much it was, but, we'll watch with interest. Anthony says, wasn't Trump saying about Starmer's accent just him taking the P out of Starmer's voice coach? Oh, I'd like to think it was as deep as that. I don't know whether I thought it was just like an American, Americans like the British accent thing. I thought it was that. But yeah, I mean, who knows? I hadn't thought about that. Maybe it was. Joanna in Salisbury says, Suella Braverman wasn't far wrong. African Americans refer to people in the United States who have their origins in any of the black races of African descendants of up to 200 years in America. Yes, African American. Is it 200 years? I didn't know that there was a kind of time thing on it. Apparently there is. Thank you, Joanna, for that. Is it Joanna or Johanna? I apologise if I've got that wrong. Let's go to Stephen, who's in Manchester. Stephen, afternoon to you.
At least you called me Stephen today.
Oh, I was thinking, I even thought about it as I said it.
The funny thing was, I watched that back on YouTube.
Yeah.
And it says Stephen in Manchester, and you called me Steve.
Yeah, but on my screen here, it said Steve.
No, it said Stephen in Manchester when we talked the other day.
No, that's not the screen I get. You're talking about what's on the telly. The screen I've got in front of me now says Stephen in Manchester. It tells me quite a lot about you, actually. You might not even realise, Stephen. But nonetheless, apparently, and the reason it said Steve was because
I'm ripping you.
I know, but the reason it said Steve, because we talked about this afterwards, is because when you'd clearly called before, that's the name that the phone operator put up. So when you call again,
I'm calling myself Steve. Honestly, I can't listen.
The big Steve, Stevie, Steve-O.
Yes.
Yes. Go on.
So she called me Steve, and my long lost lamented brother was David. Stephen and David. hello, you know, when you could be called Connor or Tom or something like that.
I know. Yeah, well, I'm called Ian. That's just a sound effect.
Oh my God!
You know, I mean, imagine. Can you imagine the playground? Man alive!
If you were called Colin.
I might have had leprosy as be called Ian.
Imagine if you were called Colin
Collins, yeah. But then that would have kind of stood out in later life, wouldn't it? Yeah. You know, kids who have unusual names at school kind of do well when they're in the workplace. You know, you go, oh wow.
I'm just ribbing you. I'm not offended by it at all. Anyway,
are you sure? Can we just settle on the big S? Is that all right?
I'm going to have to call my psychologist now.
I think you might have to. A bit of counselling lined up. Anyway,
let's talk about Donald.
Let's talk about Donald and Keir and that moment in the Oval Office.
I thought he was. Was he playing him? I don't know. I mean, I just thought it was a bit OTT from Keir, and I thought Donald was just like going, I'm going to go with the flow here. Do you know what I mean?
There was a bit of that, wasn't he? He was just kind of free-flowing. And I got the impression Donald Trump didn't really care much what was said.
I'm not sure about that, but I kind of just... I think he was kind of a bit shocked, wasn't he? And you know, the touchy-feely bit as well. I don't get that. Like, you know... but I just thought Donald was actually okay about all this.
When you say the touchy-feely bit, you mean when they keep sort of patting each other's back or arm?
Yeah, all that sort of stuff.
Well, it's just a kind of, it's a sort of pecking order thing, isn't it?
If I've known you for 26 years, then you can touch me and feel me, but I mean, like...
Yeah, it's like the big pat on the back, you know, I'm not intimidated by you, come on, mate, you know, I'm more of a boy than you are.
Also, which you guys haven't really picked up on today, because I listened to Michael this morning. Love Michael. Michael the Eggman, Mike Graham the Eggman, Mike Graham's a walrus. Coo-coo-coo-choo. I love him, right? Honestly. Yeah. But no one picked
Sorry, is that his new jingle that we've all missed?
Yeah. There you go. And anyway, hey, you can have that. The thing is, it was kind of a bit weird, wasn't it? Like, he was trying to hard Starmer, and Donald almost was like relaxed about it. And whether you like him or not and agree with his policies and stuff like that, I just thought, I wasn't impressed, to be honest, of our Prime Minister, I guess.
What would you give if you were marking his homework, Stephen, based on that moment at the White House, both the Oval Office bit and the press conference?
I have to give him 5 out of 10.
Okay.
Right? And that's generous, but and not because I dislike... Listen, I voted for this mob, so I'm responsible for...
Hang on, you voted Labour, did you?
I did, yeah, this time round, yeah. I know, horrendous.
No wonder you've got name issues.
Tim Davie as well, by the way.
Say again?
I wanted to talk to you about Tim Davie.
From the BBC?
When's he going to go? Yeah. I mean, this was just a massive miscalculation on the part of the BBC, I guess.
It's unthinkable that nobody could have known. Yeah. That's the bit that I think is the
problem. When you look back at, I suppose, I guess, Savile, Rolf Harris, Stuart Hall, all these people where they just tried to bury the news, basically, and they did successfully for years, didn't they?
Yeah, do you know what? There is a vague defence of that. I mean, in that Jimmy Savile documentary, I think it's the Netflix one, where they interview one of the guys that was Savile's producer, who genuinely did not know about this stuff. I mean, he's not lying. He wasn't there to defend him. He was distraught that he didn't know.
Did you see the Coogan?
I still haven't seen that. No.
You need to watch it. It is creepily horrible, I tell you.
I bet it was.
And then when you watch it, listen, I remember when I was a kid growing up and you know, Jim Fix and stuff like that.
100%.
Where all those Cub Scouts went on the loop at Revolution. Do you remember that?
At Alton Towers.
Pop and stuff like that, right? And you're going, oh my God, this guy's the greatest person in the world.
It was the greatest TV show. This man made dreams come true, right? I mean, who didn't know?
They were kind of like protecting this guy. Now, how many more times are we going to have to say? Well, that's kind of wrong, anyway.
I don't think. I certainly don't say it as a defence of the BBC. And there was an era, wasn't there, when people would almost tell kind of almost amusing anecdotes about, be careful of old Mick. He's very, very handsy with the girls, likes them young, and it would almost be said as a kind of, a funny story. And it's only, you look at it now.
The BBC do some wonderful stuff, by the way. So let's not all get like.
Yeah, and just because somebody, I mean, I noticed, you know, every now and again somebody's jailed for something, and the headline in the Mail is BBC Star is, you know, Jonah, you look BBC Star, and you look down and you realise it was once an extra in ever decreasing circles 30 years ago.
The World Service and stuff like that, and 5 Live and that. Obviously, I'm listening to you guys more and more, and I listen to TS as well, and you know, Love Alan and Ali and stuff like that. Right? But the thing is, at some point, when's this man going to resign? Because I think this 400 grand going to this documentary, which was pretty one-sided, I guess.
But do you know what? I haven't got a problem with it being one-sided if they tell you that in the beginning. If they say, right, this, and then next week they'll put one on from, you know, here's some Israeli kids who are going to tell a similar story. Listen, Stephen, we got to shoot. We hit the clock. We've run over, in fact. Stephen in Manchester, thank you to him. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
They have looked at us. They do know we have problems. The shine has come off, and actually a bit like a sort of big cousin who's a bit more successful, who worries about the sort of, you know, wider family at large and wants them to be okay, who sort of has a pastoral, patriarchal role to play in the greater family. That's what America's doing now, is looking over to Europe, it's looking over to the UK and saying, look, you're one of us. We're kind of all part of the same civilizational development that's been facing a crisis. Get your act together.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
26 minutes after 3 o'clock, it is Talk. We're going to talk some great tech stories around Microsoft. Big revelation from Microsoft in the last half an hour. Bring you that breaking news as well. if you're into tech, you'll be aware that tech stories used to be geek stories, didn't they? Used to sit in very specific parts of magazines and newspapers. Now tech stories make the front pages. They're often the biggest headlines because of the strange world we're living in. Let's go to Paul in Lincolnshire. Back to that story of GPs and the problem with getting one, Paul. Good afternoon to you.
All right.
Yeah, good, thanks. What are your thoughts?
So I'm a pharmacist and I've worked in community pharmacy and general practice.
Yep.
And I can't see, the investment is needed, but I can't see how it will make a difference if you see the issue I have, having worked in the sort of sector,
yep,
is that you haven't got enough doctors.
So even if you have the most efficient, unbelievably great, super-duper IT online booking system, if you only got one doctor at the end of it, it doesn't make any difference.
Yeah, I think I've never seen it in practice, but sometimes it can serve as a triage purpose, and I do know colleagues, mates of mine, who've used it quite well. But I live in rural community, and where I'm working as a community pharmacist now, it's a huge rural community with one surgery that just, in my sort of vision, that just doesn't have the doctors. And I've worked with a lot of medical students, you know, they come and sit in the clinics with me, and not a lot of them want to do general practice.
A thankless task, is that the kind of overarching reason?
I think possibly, you know, one of the misnomers is that you'll have patients will think that a GP doesn't do anything because it's all phone calls nowadays. That's not true. The guys I was working with were doing 12, 13, 14-hour days.
Right.
You know, and I think that sort of... it's not very appealing, is it? You know, you can go
really,
and work in a speciality in a hospital, you know, as a consultant, and that certainly would be more attractive 9 to 5 with a bit of private work on the side. So making general practice attractive to the young kids coming out of medical school would be my first go-to. And if you want to do it, if you're going to change this, it takes 10 years to produce a GP.
Yeah.
You know,
well, that's the problem, isn't it? You just can't do it overnight anyway. With the best, we could throw everything at it, and we wouldn't see a manifestation of that result forever.
No, and there's all sorts of little schemes that they're relevant, they're useful. That, you know, I was a pharmacist, and there was a certain amount of work I could do, and I was seeing patients for minor illness as well, like some nurses do as well now.
Yep.
But I guarantee you, patients want to see a doctor, and they want to look them in the white of the eyes.
Yep.
You know, tell me what's wrong with me, sort of issue.
100%.
People like me are not the solution to the problem. But that's my thought on the matter. And
I get it. But I think your thought is a very qualified one, Paul, because you've worked alongside those systems and you've seen it in action for its its good points and its clear shortcomings. Great call, Paul. Thank you very much, Paul in Lincolnshire, pharmacist who knows that territory. Kevin is in Portsmouth. A word on Keir Starmer and Trump. Kevin, what did you make of it? How did the boy do over there in the Oval Office?
He stood up and said he loved his country and he believed in free speech. I mean, you know, the telly nearly became a write-off because he doesn't. He's got all these non-crime hate incidents, which is the suppression of free speech.
Yep. Then
Trump says, yeah, probably quite mind to do the Chagos deal, which set me thinking, why would Trump do that? Well, if Trump, he said he's going to extend the lease from 100 to 140 years. So that's a good step forward. Trump's terms will probably be nobody can go anywhere near the surrounding islands, so we can't be snooped upon by our enemies. And finally, he said, well, if the Brits are going to pay the rent, I should care.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Yeah.
Look at it from that. So he doesn't give a toss, providing he's got Diego Garcia and he's got security around Diego Garcia and we're paying the rent. Why should he worry?
Plus, by then he'll own Canada and Greenland.
Well, I mean, Canada hopefully is going to elect a prime minister who is marginally less brutal and repressive than Justin Trudeau. Don't forget he confiscated all those protesting truckers.
I mean, just beyond extraordinary.
Yeah, and anyone who supported them, he shut them down too.
Yeah.
And here he is, a freedom-loving liberal Democrat.
This is a deeply horrible person, and we can't even go, well, that was just his political head. No, he believes this nonsense.
He really does. So does Starmer believes all this stuff. He believes that a woman can have a penis and a man can have a cervix, and there are 74, all this other complete nonsense. And then it was sometime today I was listening in, and somebody was saying that that was it when Trump was turned around and said, no, I never called Zelensky a dictator.
That's right.
Been castigated for that. Well, he did.
Yes.
But the point is that he's never turned around and says a woman can have a penis or a man can have a cervix.
That's very true.
And then stuck by it for decades.
Yes, and then stuck by it, yeah. It's wrong to say... That was Keir Starmer's line, wasn't it? It's only a woman can have a cervix. He said, I think it's wrong to say that. And it's like, really? That's wrong to say? Man alive. You're the flipping Prime Minister now. And I would imagine, I think you're alluding to the same thing, Kevin. I think he probably still thinks that.
Oh, he does. And the thing is, he's a lawyer, and don't forget that lawyers are trained to hunt with the hounds and run with the hare.
Yeah.
Because they, 1 minute you're prosecuting, next minute you're defending.
True.
So basically, Starmer can turn anything around on a sixpence and say black is white and white is black.
That's his only. It's his only skill, and I'm not sure it's a good one. Listen, great call, Kevin. Thank you very much indeed, Kevin in Portsmouth. A couple of comments from you. Trevor in Harrow says we're crying out for bricklayers and plumbers. What an idle time to change prisoners from the University of Crime to the University of Practical Skills. Should that be trained prisoners? Yeah, I 100% agree. If that's what it's meant to say, I would absolutely agree with that. Mario in Buckinghamshire referenced the Suella Braverman comment, says, my parents came from Italy in 1960. I was born here in 68. I've always felt Italian in my blood. At school, I was treated as a foreigner, and when I go to Italy, I'm treated as a foreigner. I'm British and proud to be British, says Mario. Thank you for that. Bill in Fleet, I'm mixed race, born in this country on my dad's side, go back several hundred years, and I'm not English, I'm British. We failed to register that English, Ireland, Scotland, Wales are areas within the British Isles, just like Westphalia in Germany and Catalonia in Spain. Get it? Bill, thank you very much indeed for that. 25 to 4, we've got tech news on its way, some belting stories to come. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is talk 25, just gone 25 to 4. Peter Cardwell is on drive this evening, or this afternoon rather, at 4 o'clock. We'll talk to Peter just before then. Let's get some tech news in, though. Some great stories going on. Will Guyatt, Talk's tech correspondent, is back with us. Afternoon to you, Will.
Yeah, afternoon to you, Ian.
Not a good day for people who own, people who have a banking app with certain banks, because they've gone wonky. What the hell's going on?
Yeah, do you notice how this seems to happen nearly every month now, with at least one of the established banks having some sort of technical problem with that? The reality is most of the old banks, the established banks, the banks we used to go to on the high street, they've all not really updated their IT systems properly since the days that you used to go in and the bank manager used to tap up your details on that green screen in front of them and then peer over their glasses and tell you whether or not you can have a credit card or not. The old access card, the flexible friend. And the reality is that they've not really gone and updated their systems. And you find this every month when everybody tries to log on to use their services, the banks have technical issues and technical difficulties. Lloyds Banking Group's explanation this morning, or their how to try and get people to solve the problem when they were told that the service was down, you can come and attend one of our branches where service is available. Back in the day, Ian, the nearest branch of theirs was 3 miles from my house. It's now 14.
Yes, and with your legs, you can't be walking down there, Will, can you?
No, definitely not. Or with yours, I would wager.
Well, I've got a mobility scooter, so I'm fine.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, is it? Because on a very serious side to this, of course. What worries people, everyone has that connection, that conversation at some point. What happens if they all go down at the same time? Then, nobody can get their money. Where is the money? Who owns the money? When can we get it back? I mean, there's, movies have been made around this stuff.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I was trying to transfer some money the other day and I ended up having to go that 13, 14 miles to my local branch, different banking company. But they, when I got there, all they wanted to do was try and sell me a business loan. So, all of these things are much of a muchness. But you never seem to hear that the challenger banks, the new digital banks that have come through, are having these similar sorts of technical difficulties. Apparently, the problems were solved around about lunchtime. All the apps came back live again. But it's a stressful time if you're somebody who's got bills to pay, or let's say somebody loaned you some money in the month and you need to transfer it to them, and because you want to have that support and that trust, you want to do it as soon as you get the money, and you don't want them to think you're taking the mickey.
Yeah, spot on. Let's have a look at this story that's just broken in the last half an hour. Big news coming out of Microsoft HQ.
Yeah, now for many people, the idea that Skype is still running would be a huge surprise, because when Microsoft bought it, I think around about 15 years ago, there was a great deal of fanfare. But the reality is quite a lot of people still use Skype. It's still used quite a lot in our industry. Lots of TV interviews and stuff are done via Skype. So imagine everybody's collective surprise when about an hour ago, Microsoft announced that Skype was being switched off in May. There was no indication that this was coming. Now, arguably, it's similar to the product Teams that they've got, which you might be using if you're a business, if you're somebody who works in a business, but they're not identical. And this is going to cause people some interesting issues in transferring accounts over and all of that kind of stuff. So it's a bit of a surprise. I haven't fully got to the bottom of what people need to do in order to transfer and everything yet. But yeah, it's still used. Skype is still used by millions and millions of people around the world. It's nowhere near as big as WhatsApp or any of the other services, but it was the first proper video calling app and service that people first used for video calls all around the world. It shouldn't be forgotten.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I've got this funny relationship with Microsoft. I still think, and don't ask me why, I know they're about the biggest player on the block. They outsell Apple in terms of computers and all the rest of it. But in my head, every time somebody mentions the word Microsoft, the sentence that always comes out is, are they still going? It seems like something me old gran might have dealt with. Are you on the old Microsoft network, are you?
I'm surprised by that, given the number of holidays you've taken overseas with Bill Gates. But,
Two holidays does not mean it's a regular thing.
Fair enough. Fair comment.
And in terms of the other choices out there, so you've got, as you say, Teams, which is also Microsoft. You've got Zoom. Apple haven't really gone big on this one, have they?
Well, you've got FaceTime video, but it's not quite the same, and you can't really use it so effectively for sort of group video. WhatsApp has got video chat if you're on the app. Google have got a product which has been folded into their Meet product, Google Meeting. So there's all sorts of video services available out there, but for many, Skype was the first one that came out, so it's the one that many still use. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens and whether or not you just have to, let's say, for example, put your password into Teams and it transfers all your accounts and everything over. Because I use Skype for various stuff, and I've probably got 400, 500 different media contacts from around the world I use for video interviews.
What are you on now? I don't know.
What am I on now?
Yeah. I don't mean, what are you on? What are you on, Will?
My health is not in question, as a colleague of yours used to say. But I'm currently using Zoom to connect to Talk Towers in London from
What do most people use then these days, do you think?
Well, it's pretty much evenly split. I think split between Zoom and Teams. If you're in a company or a business, I think that's the reality. And there'll still be a number of people holding on to something like Skype. And like I said, to give you an example, not name dropping the big players, but most of the main broadcasters would still opt for Skype because the video quality just marginally edges Zoom.
But it's a bit like Bluetooth, isn't it? It's still not, somebody says, we're going to do a Zoom meeting or whatever, and you sit there and they've sent you a link, and then when you put it in your diary, and when you look at it, there's a link, there's about 10 links on there, and you think, right, which one have I got to hit? And it's not clean, it's not easy, and then you're the only person there, and the other people are waiting for you. You think, well, hang on, I'm here, but you're not there, and everybody goes through that.
The worst bit is when somebody says, I'm sorry, your mic's not switched on, when you're sat there, mouthing into the call and nobody can hear what you're saying.
Absolutely. US intelligence head not told about the UK's secret Apple data demand. This was, I think it was literally a week ago that the UK capitulated to Apple, Apple capitulated sort of to the UK's request for, we want to see what's in the iCloud.
They didn't capitulate at all, and I know you were swivelling repeatedly in your chair when this happened, thought it was the biggest threat to data in
One
society.
of the biggest stories I've ever seen in my life. Seriously.
Yeah,
it's literally like saying everybody in the UK has got to give the government the key to your front door.
It's not quite...
exactly...
No, it's
exactly the same thing.
It's not... well, I understand your concern. It is not quite as simple as that, because unless the government manages to abolish the need to get a search warrant or a warrant to investigate your phone or a warrant to get the materials from the provider of the service, they can't get hold of it. Information is not being freely exchanged with the government. That is definitely not currently happening. But what has happened here is the government in the UK have gone, yeah, we'll have access to everything on the iPhone. You can just connect, you can just give us a key or a backward route into it. And Apple have gone, up yours. We're not doing that for you, because if we do that, we break our security globally for everybody else. So technically, other than China, we are the only country in the world where this advanced security system has been switched off by Apple.
Which is bizarre. I mean, what's strange about this is that when I first read it, I thought, the only explanation is that every other country, similar size economy around the world, is doing the same thing. France, Germany, Spain, etc.
They will now.
Do you think they will?
Yeah, they're all going to try and apply pressure on Apple to try and do something to try and get access to services.
So if somebody is known to have, WhatsApp, of course, have had their debates with, or Meta have had their debates with governments over this point of privacy and encryption. And I'm not saying it's never tricky. You think there's a paedophile over there who's got some horrendous photographs on their phone. You go over to Mark Zuckerberg and say, we need access to this. He says, I don't have any access to it. I literally don't have access to it, which is true. Apple, we don't have access. The only person that has it is the person you're actually trying to arrest or try to convict, whatever it happens to be. It is difficult, and that's the reason why the government wants it. But why would Apple still... I mean, you say they didn't capitulate, but they kind of did, didn't they? Because they've removed the ability to have the protection.
They didn't. They didn't capitulate. In order to operate legally in the UK, they had to either give the key or remove the...
Well, they should have just set up yours, and the government would have capitulated.
Well, that is as much, but they would have also been in breach of a UK law, and the most important and interesting thing here is there's two things that haven't come from this. It's an operational government situation, so they don't talk about this sort of stuff.
Yes.
They approached? Have they approached Google? Have they approached Microsoft? Has somebody knocked on the door at ByteDance? We don't have any of those answers at the moment. And I know we're running short of time right now, but that is the key to this whole situation. 25, 30 years ago, the government could wiretap your phone. They could get access to your communications. They could steam your letters open. All that sort of stuff happened, but in surveillance. But they can't do that now. And what the government wants is a route into surveillance. And whilst it's true, Ian, that you can, bad stuff can hide behind encryption, child sexual abuse materials, all that kind of stuff. Most people, the overwhelming majority of people, use encryption for security. The government advised its own ministers 2 days before this happened to turn it on for security on devices.
Yeah.
So it's just bonkers.
It is indeed. Stay with us, Will, because there's another story still to come. What is happening with your Alexa? Oh, boy, you thought an Alexa did funky stuff. You ain't seen nothing yet. We've got the latest on that detail. Stand by to either be massively impressed or a little bit frightened. Will Guyatt is with us. Lots still to come. Peter Cardwell on the way. And time now to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning £25,000.
Time's running out to get involved in our 25 grand competition. Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to win this life-changing amount of money for 2025. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that, but time is running out. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
We allowed, over the last 12 months, 850,000 foreigners to come and live here. These are not illegal migrants, these are legal. There are, I think, it's like, are we like 70 million people living now, or is it more? This country's full, and yet these politicians, this isn't just Starmer and his useless gang, this is the Tories before, are just letting millions of more people to come and live here. It's mad.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, it is Talk. It's just gone 10 to 4. Will Guyot, Talk's tech correspondent, is with us. Interesting has happened, Will, since we were just talking about encryption and WhatsApp and goodness knows what else. And in that time, the WhatsApp machine has broken.
Yeah, WhatsApp has occasional outages. It goes down for little periods of time. Let's see what occurs here and how long it's off for. But for about the last 10, 15 minutes, it's not been available. If Down Detector, which is a common website which you can see how many people are searching whether something's working or not, is a good indicator. So no news from Meta or anything right now about the outage. They typically wait half hour or so when something like this is down before posting something elsewhere. But hilariously, everybody's gone back to X to see whether or not WhatsApp is working. So, yeah, it's down at the moment.
I think you're being naive here. This is Keir Starmer's government who's decided that they are fed up with people having the freedom of speech to communicate on these newfangled tech things called WhatsApp. They've taken it down, Will. They've removed our ability to have an opinion.
Well, you're going on holiday with Right Said Fred next week, aren't you?
Yeah, Right Said Fred are there. Ike's driving the bus, so between us, it's going to be a mother of all trips. I can't wait.
Amazing.
We're going to Basingstoke. It's going to be brilliant.
Great. Good 5G there.
Oh, yeah. The Freds love it down there. And let's talk Alexa here, because they've relaunched with a bit of an ambition to be your best digital friend. What are they doing over there at Google HQ?
Everybody bought an Amazon Alexa. There's tons of them around the UK, but most people are using them as a smart egg timer, or have just got them to stream talkTV, talk radio in the kitchen. So that's why most people are using these devices in 2025. Everybody's got excited about ChatGPT and other places to become your digital assistant. So as you would expect, Amazon are kicking back. They're launching what they're calling their Alexa Plus service. Now, it's a subscription service if you're not a member of Amazon Prime, so they're using it as an offer for people who use Prime. And the idea is you're going to be able to ask your Alexa to do all the kinds of things you would be typically asking a chatbot. So you can ask it now to book a restaurant for you. You can ask it to send a message to somebody. You can kind of get it to do more tasks than it was previously able to do. It's had a significant upgrade in many ways. But this is edging towards, Amazon, if it becomes popular, being able to say, oh, here's another subscription you've got to subscribe to.
Oh, 100%.
That's what this will eventually be. But they lost some ground. Everybody has one. It was like when everybody bought that Nintendo Wii games console about 15, 20 years ago. Nearly everybody had one in the back of the cupboard. Not everybody was using it. But Amazon are hoping they can capitalize on a bit of that love for the Amazon Echo and the Alexa and bring it back.
And I do wonder, if they're talking about it being free for Prime members and, 20 quid a month or whatever for non-members, whatever it turns out to be. So the idea is you're going out for a meal and you say, Alexa, book the old chippy in Bromley, please, for Friday evening, and then it will book you the chippy for you and your partner. It will then ask if you want a taxi to go there. It can book that. It will then ask if you want to, because in your algorithm it will say that you always use Lucy, the babysitter. Do you want us to message Lucy and book her in? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, and also they're saying it'll scan photos and stuff. So let's say, for example, people are so taken with your jacket and your watch and whatever you're wearing today, they could take a photo of you from the screen, run it through Amazon, and it'll tell you which pound store you got your get-up from, and it would order it for you.
Yeah. It's the 99p store, actually, but so it's not that. Clearly needs improvement. And in terms of ecosystems that do this, are Amazon leading the way on this kind of stuff? Because Apple have never, again, it's another thing that Apple have really, they've got their own pod, but they've largely left this kind of technology alone. It doesn't do quite the same thing. It's more for music.
Yeah, you're quite right. And when this Alexa was launched, everybody got really excited about it. But the reality was Amazon hoped you were going to order more toilet roll with it. That is essentially what it was created for, to make you order more things from its platform. And that's what it's going to hope you're going to do through whatever digital little service you use for it now.
And just briefly, Will, I noticed when I was looking at because you always look to see if there's a new version of the thing you've got. You're right, I use it as a timer a lot. I use it for radio, I use it to play music, and the odd, tell us a fact about something for the kids. But you can get a full TV screen Alexa, can't you, as well, which is kind of like a 20-inch TV.
Yeah, you can get them of all shapes and sizes now. My favourite function on there, Lola, my daughter, loves asking it to fart. So that's one thing you can do really well with an Alexa, yes. Yeah, oh, yes, I did, yes. Sorry, I thought... you say that's what it was. I thought that was just me listening to Christo. That's another story. Listen, Will, thank you very much indeed, as ever. I jest. Will Gaius, Talks Tech correspondent, with us on the programme. Coming up next is Peter Cardwell. Look, you've got a whole team. I've never seen such a big team putting a show together, Peter. This is going to be the mother of all drive time shows this afternoon. This looks busy. And you've got almost an entire wad of A4 with a running order on it.
And we've got a running order and everything.
What is going on?
There's a lot. In a few minutes' time, Zelensky is going to arrive at the White House. There's going to be a press conference a little bit later on. We know from the little sit-down mini press conference, which was actually almost as long as the bigger press conference yesterday with Starmer, that there's plenty that Zelensky will want to get off his chest.
Will they do it in the same chronologies, the same as Macron had?
Largely the same one, yeah. Although what's interesting is how little Starmer actually said yesterday, because of course all the questions were to Donald Trump, and most of the answers were as well.
I thought that was a bit weird. It didn't quite happen with Macron, who after he played limb twister with the president, they did a bit of that strange stuff, and then it seems kind of 50-50. But all the questions came in and there were domestic questions as well.
Yeah, I think the thing with Starmer is that he knows it's all risk. Anytime he opens his mouth with Donald Trump around, it's all risk, and things can go horribly wrong. We'll also talk about Annalise Dodds, a woman you've never heard of, resigning from her job you didn't know she had, over Starmer's decision to cut the aid budget, and terror police examining whether the BBC broke the law with the Gaza documentary. We'll speak to a former BBC broadcaster who's now a professor of journalism at City University. Also, GP strike, could it end the 8 o'clock scramble? We'll be talking about that. We'll get a sports update, and prisoners may have to earn release under radical Texas-style reforms. It sounded like a good idea to me, but I'm not quite sure how it's going to work.
Yeah, two interesting facts about Annalise Dodds. Well, not facts, thoughts about Annalise Dodds. Firstly, I thought she'd been in Parliament since about 1981. Right. She's been there since 2017.
Yes.
So she's relatively
new.
Quite new.
Yes.
I also think, I thought, when they do the father of the house and the mother of the house,